Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If we could turn that down just a little bit. The Hilton Parkway Gateway Corridor Independent Review Advisory Committee, Wednesday, June 12th, 2024. Do we have access to turn that down just a little bit? Yeah. First, we'll start off with the approval of minutes for the meeting of April 22nd, 2024 and May 8th, 2024. Do we have a motion?
I have some comments.
Okay, we've got a motion.
Before we approve,
Mhm.
I have some comments.
Okay.
So I read through all the long minutes. I read through all the minutes, and there are a few points that I'd like to follow up on. One was that there was going to be looked into what made the 8 people go to Colombia at the time, based on the fact that we had approved that at the meeting. Whereas at the meeting we only said, "Oh, look at the total amounts," and that was going to be reviewed and looked into. Has that been done at all?
Yes, that was reviewed, and there was a video that was sent out to all committee members that showed that.
Okay. Because I don't recall that was the intention of sending a whole busload of people up to Colombia at the time.
Well, if I could clarify, because that request was made at the meeting, I sent to the entire committee the record of the meeting, where the request to reach out to both Beaufort County and SCDOT was made, that it was important to do that. There was no recommendation on, from the committee as to how that engagement was to take place. And so the information was shared with Beaufort County, it was shared with SCDOT, and a meeting was held in Columbia with SCDOT and the county to get feedback as requested by the committee.
Then, okay, so the other points, the fact that I disagree with the fact that later on in the minute it says feedback had been obtained from SCDOT at the committee's direction. I don't think that was at the committee's direction either. So, I think that trip was initiated under a different direction than this corridor committee intended to. And I just want to note that for the record. It also says in the minutes that John Collin had asked Mueller to move forward with alternative 1, with design modification to consider based on the feedback received from SCDOT. And I wonder how that happens. We haven't really decided on alternative 1 as the favorite alternative. So how can you direct somebody to do that?
Well, go ahead, Sean.
I'm happy to respond.
Okay.
So Mueller, again, in their independent review, has performed the scope of work recommended by the committee and approved by town council. They presented 4 alternatives to the committee. At the request of the committee, and I was clear, and we can watch the video if we need to, I was clear to make sure there was committee support to share those alternatives and the express or southern bypass option with SCDOT and Beaufort County. That occurred. It was shared, the documents were shared with both Beaufort County and SCDOT with a request to provide responses and their opinion and feedback on the alternatives that were present. So 4 from Mueller, as well as the southern bypass. We received in writing from the Deputy Secretary of Transportation, Robert Perry, the SCDOT's position on the four alternatives and the southern bypass. They were not supportive of alternative 2, 3, or 4 from Lockmueller, nor were they supportive in any way of the southern bypass alternative that was presented. Based on that information and feedback that I shared with the committee, we moved forward with alternative 1 as the viable option that was included in the recommendations from Lockmueller.
Yeah, so but in essence, it's done on SCDOT's directive, not on the committee's directive. And the other thing is that, and we'll get back into that later, is that the second southern bypass alternative, which is a solution that has no impact on Stony, it has no impact on right-of-ways, it has a insignificant environmental impact, doesn't affect Honeyhorn, and it ties in directly with the Cross Island Parkway, has not been pushed by the town either. And I find that concerning, and we have to get back to that later on in the presentation from Nick.
But I'm happy, if Mayor, I don't want to debate it at this point, but I'm happy to respond.
I would hold off because.
Yeah, we can discuss it later. But
Yeah, because we're just trying to approve the minutes as to what was said and what was done and not
Right.
dissect it
Okay.
as to why. Yes.
Thanks.
Okay. So we've got a motion. Do we have a second? We got a first and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by raising your right hand. Opposed? Okay, it is 4-0. Update on project progress.
Can I have,
I did both the 24th and the 8th. Yeah.
can I make one suggestion, Alan? Can we, appearances by citizens is after we're all done. And I think that at this last meeting, we need to hear from citizens before we even start to consider resolutions and things of that nature. So I propose that we move item 5 after item 3.
Is there a second to that motion?
Sure, I'll second it.
All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? It gets moved to the end, stays at the end.
If it's a draw, it's at the end?
Appearance by citizens. All right, update.
Thank you, sir. This is our 10th meeting of the advisory committee. Now that we've had Lockmueller on board, we had several meetings starting last spring to outline the RFQ and scope of work, to put out a contract to solicit a consultant to do this work. But we've had 10 public meetings. Lockmueller has been working through the approved scope of work included within their contract, and to date has provided a series of presentations and findings related to the requirements of that contract and scope of work. Today, they're going to focus on the downstream impacts, which were the next part of their evaluation, and complete the findings as outlined in the contract to provide information that would position the town to make a decision on the greater project. Some additional work on intersection alternatives for downstream intersections will be completed and presented to town council at a later date. But this includes the final findings that were in the contract and presented to the committee. I'll have Nate go through and provide a project progress, and then jump into the agenda. If that, Mayor, I'll have him give his progress on the project, and then we'll jump into the agenda items on the meeting.
And if I could just, I want to clarify something while I was talking to Mr. Advocate. There will be an option for public comment prior to us taking a vote on that resolution, but appearance by citizens will still be at the end.
Okay, understood.
All right, thank you, Sean. Mayor Perry, members of the committee, thank you for having us once again. It's a pleasure to be before you. Team members joining us today, a lot of familiar faces: Kate Swinford, Michelle Romine, and Chad Costa. We have them available to answer any questions related to those subjects as needed during the course of the presentation. The agenda that we'd like to focus on today is to give you an overall update on the project's progress. And then Michelle's going to give a presentation that outlines, as Sean alluded to, the impacts that we have found for all of the downstream intersections that are included in Task 4. In other words, the intersections downstream of Gumtree, as well as downstream of the Cross Island all the way down to Sea Pine Circle. To reiterate what Sean said, these consider the selection of alternative 1 with the modification of having a single eastbound left turn and a single southbound right turn at Squire Pope Road, developing a VISTA model, optimizing the timings, considering the adaptive system from Bluffton all the way through to Gumtree. But then also within that VISTA model, we are incorporating the intersections remaining within the study areas, all the way down to Indigo Run, and all the way down to Sea Pine Circle. But the difference there is that those are just impacts. We have not went through the mitigation strategies as of yet. We just want you to see what the timings would be at those intersections under their existing geometry. Items that we've been working on since we last met, developing and understanding what those impacts would be. We developed an accompanying technical memorandum that is in part and parcel with what the items that Michelle is going to be speaking to today. That is considered an interim deliverable of Task 4.4. The full version of that deliverable will include the mitigation strategies as well. We've continued and are in the process of evaluating mitigation strategies. And then we've also put together a singular PDF that has all of our submitted deliverables to date for the benefit of the committee, but then also too, as we begin engaging the council members, they have all of the documents all in one place. If they're looking at the scope, they can see, have you met this task deliverable? And they can see that we have. So from all tasks 1 through 3 and a partial of the first deliverable for 4, we have completed. From an overall standpoint, I would estimate that we are 75% complete, given that we are well within completion of Task 4. Task 1, the only remaining item that we have in our scope was just to be one coordination meeting with town staff, and then we can consider that 100% complete. Task 2, as we mentioned multiple times, that is 100% complete. Task 3, we're considering 90%. The reason for that is we have provided you the deliverable for that. However, we will be submitting or presenting some of those findings to members of council when we engage them formally for the first time next week. After those meetings, we will be able to consider Task 3 100% complete. Task 4, we think we're about halfway done with that because we have an understanding of what the impacts are going to be, and we're working through mitigation strategies for those. And then similar to what we provided to you in Task 3.6, the summary findings memo, again, that's labeled as Task 4.4 in our scope addendum. We have an interim version that we've submitted to you to understand the impacts earlier this week. We'll final that out to have the mitigation strategies included to formalize that document. And then we'll be presenting that to members of council as well. And then Task 5 is just the summation of everything we've done to date to put into one comprehensive document to memorialize our work. And that'll be after completion of Task 4. So does anyone have any questions on the progress that we've made thus far?
Any questions?
I'm just wondering, we seem to be rushing towards the finish line, no matter what, and parts of your work are not finished. Do you expect things to be finished before the 17th of June, or is it going to take more time? Next.
What are you referring to that's not completed?
Sorry?
What are you referring to that's not completed?
Well, you mentioned over there 75% complete, 50% complete.
75 if you consider the entire project. The goal of the meetings that are going to take place on Monday and then the new council meeting date of June 20th is to engage the council members for the first time and to let them know, to ask any questions of any project or any work that we've completed from tasks 1 through 3, which again, we provided the formal deliverable for task 3 at the last meeting. And then we've also provided to them the interim findings for impacts that Michelle is going to be speaking to today. So we have completed all of the subject deliverables up and through task 3, and we've got an interim deliverable ready for discussions with council members for task 4.4.
All right.
Any other questions? Continue.
Okay, before we transition to Michelle to go into the findings for the downstream impacts, we did want to pause just a moment, and Kate's going to take a few moments and highlight some what we're calling review items that we felt would be beneficial to reemphasize, our method of operations as we've progressed through the project, as well as answer a couple questions that we've received related to levels of service criteria and the generation of our base traffic data. So Kate, if you could join in.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Good afternoon, everybody. As Nate reiterated earlier, we are certainly happy to be here again with you today. I first want to just review, the independent study goals as we understood them at the outset of our tasks, which is to review the work that had been previously done by other parties, including SCDOT and Beaufort County, try and see if we agreed with the methods and methodologies that were undertaken to arrive at those conclusions of those studies. And, if we perhaps didn't agree on any items, would we change something? We did find one of those items with the growth rate that we previously have discussed. Even with change in the growth rate, our suggested change in the growth rate, we ultimately did not find, very much differentiation between the results of prior study efforts and the results of our study efforts with respect to previously considered alternatives. So as far as an independent study goes, we believe that we achieved that item without, outside input. Mueller was not a participant in the meeting with SCDOT. We have never coordinated directly with SCDOT. So please rest assured that our analysis of any of that prior work that has been done truly was independent as intended, with our selection having no prior relationship with SCDOT or any of their employees. And still through this process, we have maintained that independence by not engaging in any of those discussions. The rest of our scope really was focused on trying to bring new ideas to the table. Were there ideas that previously were considered that maybe weren't given as much consideration that we thought were good ideas? And maybe do we have ideas of our own that we would like to provide for consideration? And again, we believe that we certainly did that with, alternatives 2, 3, and 4. I know that there are lots of, certainly, lots of opinions, on various sides for this issue. And I just want to reiterate that our place in this is to provide facts and our independent analysis to provide those facts and hopefully help these groups make their decision. So, we're happy to continue, any new fact-finding missions, as directed and approved, but our current working scope that has been approved and our current mission, that we have set, the path that we've set down, we believe that we have done that to, certainly the best of our professional ability. Moving on to the next item, the reported results in many of our documents reference level of service. And I know there are a few questions that have continued as to the differences in the levels of service, A through F, what really should be considered acceptable or not. And I just want to remind everybody, or just review this thought. Level of service certainly is one of the metrics that we use to analyze different alternatives and assess if we consider something acceptable or not, or consider something that provides a level of improvement or not. But it's only one metric of a 3-pronged approach. And when we initially started talking about existing levels of service that we have on this corridor, I went into this discussion, but that was a few meetings ago, so we felt it was pertinent to review it today, just to kind of bring it back to the top of everybody's mind. Level of service is only one of a 3-pronged approach in our mind for how we analyze if an alternative or a certain approach is acceptable. The other 2 prongs are Q and then volume to capacity ratio, which discusses lane capacity. So Q length is the resulting length or number of cars that will be stacked waiting for their turn to, enter the corridor or progress down the corridor if they're waiting at a signal. Volume to capacity ratio speaks to lane capacity, and that's, if you look through our tables, that will be the decimal number. And if it's larger than 1, that means that the volume is greater than the physical lane capacity provided that particular approach. If it's less than 1, theoretically, it means that there is, plenty of pavement space there for the vehicles that are trying to access the approach, and potentially excess capacity in some of their situations. So I just want to go over those topics briefly. That when we look at these alternatives and try and assess them and compare them against one another, we're not only looking at levels of service, we're also looking at queuing that is resulting from the configuration, as well as the lane capacity, which is the volume to capacity, or V to C ratio, that we show in some of those tables. And even if a level of service on a side street may be, in the D level or the E level, if the queue is reasonable, less than 100 feet, and the volume to capacity ratio is, below 1 or well below 1, that would be an issue that I consider acceptable, because the only reason that a vehicle would be waiting there that long is really due to side street traffic, not necessarily anything wrong with the, they're waiting due to mainline traffic. They're not, not waiting because there's anything wrong necessarily with the geometric configuration of the side street. So I wanted to briefly review those topics as we consider some of the other impacts that Michelle's going to present after this. So if we go to the next slide, Nate, there's one more thing I want to review with everybody, which is our traffic volumes. We have presented these numerous times in various fashions, whether it be slideshow, presentations to this committee, or, including graphics in the appendices of presentations we've given to the committee, or included in various reports. But again, want to reiterate that all of our hourly volumes that we are using were collected in 2023, and that has been the basis for all of our scenarios. These are hourly volumes, not just daily volumes. We do look at both of those sets of data for different things, but the main bulk of our analysis has been based on hourly volumes. And specifically, we use the 30th highest day for traffic volumes to ensure that the analysis we are conducting is responsible. It responsibly reflects peak conditions, and it does not over or underestimate any of the traffic volumes. That is a standard practice.
Kate, I think you cut out. Oh, I'm sorry.
And it looks like she dropped.
Yeah, she may have dropped.
Michelle, while we're
Okay.
waiting on Kate, would you mind go ahead and finishing out this slide?
I can take over from here. So I believe what Kate was saying is that we were using the 30th highest day for our traffic volumes, and that helps. I'll let her, I think she's able to join again.
Can you hear us, Kate?
Hi. Can you all hear me again?
Yes.
Okay, I sincerely apologize. My computer crashed, but I have called in on my phone, so I hope that this audio is still okay for you all.
Yes.
Okay. Again, my apologies. So I believe I cut out talking about historical traffic volumes, the 30th hour ADT, the 30th highest hour for traffic volumes. So just reiterating that our hourly volumes that we used were indeed from March of 2023. We look at hourly and ADT volumes. We did not just look at ADT volumes for any part of this analysis. We used the 30th highest day for traffic volumes to ensure that we are not over or underestimating the peak, and it is a responsible reflection of what we can expect, in our no build and in future scenarios. And we did a lot of confirming, cross-checking with historical SCDOT data that, the data we were presented to use, did align with that 30th hour for all the volumes that were collected within the entire 12-month period before and after they were collected. So we are confident that the hourly volumes we were using for this analysis are sound. There also have been a few requests to do stress testing or sensitivity analysis with varying growth rates or varying years. And I just want to review that our future analysis was, per our scope, predicated on one growth rate, which, we have explained in prior presentations. We felt a different growth rate was more appropriate than the one used in some of the prior study efforts. And using that singular growth rate, we were going to analyze a future year of 2045. And any year prior to 2045, would theoretically be using lower traffic volumes. So your worst case scenario in our analysis is what we are showing you in the 2045 setting. So any of the years prior that are in question, what about 2030 or 2035 or 2040? All of those years would show better results than what we are showing you. 2045 is a worst case scenario for our analysis. So I want to clarify that there would not be, worse results potentially, in any of the years leading up to 2045, and the future results that we are reporting are a conservative estimate in that sense. So again, I apologize for my technical difficulties. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Michelle to review the downstream impacts.
All right, do we have any questions? Okay. Does not appear to be any.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Before I get into the downstream impacts, I'm actually going to build off of some of what Kate said. We have provided some excerpts of our traffic volumes to help show the hourly volumes we used in our analysis. As Kate mentioned, all of the traffic volumes were provided as part of the committee meeting on March 27th, as well as within our corridor alternatives analysis memorandum, which we submitted on May 3rd. I'm going to focus just west of intersection 9, which is Squire Pope. As shown in the column on the left, which is our morning peak hour, we have approximately 2,800 vehicles traveling in the eastbound direction. This includes those 156 left turns that's shown in the intersection 9 box in the top left, the 2,620 through vehicles, and the 2 right turning vehicles. In the evening, which is in the right column, just west of Squire Pope at intersection 9, we have approximately 3,000 vehicles traveling in the westbound direction. Now this includes the 2,687 through vehicles, as well as the 2 northbound left turns and the 341 southbound right turns to get to the volumes just west of Squire Pope. Now these volumes shown here are the traffic volumes that we used in the 2023 existing conditions analysis. And you can go to the next slide too, please. We then took those volumes and grew them by our determined growth rate of 0.56%. Again, just west of intersection 9 at Squire Pope, we have approximately 3,150 vehicles traveling in the eastbound direction during the morning. And in the evening, we have approximately 3,400 vehicles traveling in the westbound direction. And these volumes were used for the 2045 scenarios. And again, these are just an excerpt from some of the major intersections we're looking at. All of the traffic volumes for all of the intersections have been provided. Okay. Now I'd like to present our findings to date on Task 4 for our scope of services. We previously analyzed 4 alternatives intended to improve the operating conditions along US 278 between Moss Creek Drive and Gumtree Road. After review of the findings and discussion with SCDOT, Mueller was directed by the town of Hilton Head Island to pursue Alternative 1, SCDOT Modified Recommended Preferred, with additional modifications to provide a single eastbound left turn lane and a single southbound right turn lane at US 278 and Squire Pope. As you may recall, the SCDOT alternative included 2 eastbound left turn lanes and 2 southbound right turn lanes here. Our modified alternative run reduces each of these to just 1 lane. We have now evaluated the impacts that the modified alternative 1 would have on the entire project study area and are working to determine what, if any, improvements should be made to accommodate the 2045 forecasted traffic east of Gumtree and along Cross Island Parkway. So this analysis includes the entire study area as shown here. Our previous analysis for the alternatives only included the intersections between Moss Creek and Gumtree. We have now extended our study to the intersections along US 278 through Indigo Run, as well as along the Cross Island Parkway towards Sea Pines Circle. We have provided travel time runs for the modified alternative 1. Again, this includes the SC DOT alternative, as well as a single eastbound left turn lane and southbound right turn lane at Squire Pope. Before we get into the numbers on the slide, I want to clarify that these values are from VISM. We have previously presented the 2045 no-build travel times, and the values shown in this table for the 2045 no-build match what we have previously presented for that scenario. However, we have not yet presented the modified alternative 1 travel times. The travel times with respect to the alternatives that we have previously presented were completed using Synchro, not VISM. The intention of those Synchro travel times was to serve as a comparison between each of the alternatives we evaluated, so alternatives 1 through 4. They were not intended to serve as final travel time calculations, as those values were to be calculated using VISM as part of task 4 that we are now in. We also noted previously that we would expect the VISM results to be a little bit more pronounced when compared to the Synchro, and this is because VISM is a micro-simulation tool, which is able to accurately replicate individual vehicles and their interactions within some complex traffic streams better than Synchro. As such, our final travel time results for the modified alternative 1, again assuming no changes along US 278 east of Gumtree or along Cross Island Parkway towards Sea Pines, are presented in this table. These values do include a thorough evaluation and optimization of the adaptive signals along US 278 within the modified alternative 1 intersections to help us ensure that the signals are operating as efficiently as possible. As shown, under the 2045 no-build scenario, it is expected that it would take approximately 26.3 minutes to travel eastbound along Hilton Parkway between Moss Creek and Indigo Run during the AM peak hour. It's expected that the travel time for the eastbound direction in the morning peak hour will be reduced to approximately 10.5 minutes under the modified alternative 1. Under the 2045 no-build scenario, it is expected that it would take approximately 25.7 minutes to travel westbound along Hilton Parkway between Moss Creek and Indigo Run during the PM peak hour. It's now expected that the travel time for the westbound vehicles in the PM peak hour will be reduced to approximately 10.3 minutes under the modified alternative 1. And again, these travel times were calculated using VISM. We are considering that these are going to be final travel times for the modified alternative 1, assuming no changes along US 278 east of Gumtree or along the Cross Island Parkway. As we continue in our work to mitigate intersections east of Gumtree or along Cross Island Parkway through to Sea Pine Circle as needed, the results shown for the modified alternative 1 in those 2 columns there may change to reflect some of those improvements. So we've provided some videos here to help you visualize the 2045 modified alternative 1. Again, we have no improvements along US 278 east of Gumtree or along Cross Island Parkway. So this is in the morning in the eastbound direction on Hilton Parkway. So as you can see here, the 6-lane section is operating acceptably. We're not seeing any queuing back towards from what we saw in the 2045 no build, as well as in some of the existing conditions. As we go towards the Pinckney Wildlife Refuge, this right in, right out is now also operating well. And you can see, as you look in the video, the platoon of those eastbound vehicles. There's quite a few eastbound vehicles, but the 6-lane section is able to accommodate them. You can see here they're able to hit the green light at Cross Tree, which helps the platoon continue through. See, it's a steady stream of eastbound vehicles in the morning. And then as we start approaching Squire Pope, we can see that it's operating pretty well. The changes with the modified alternative 1 are in this point in time. Again, this video is just one snapshot. It's not reflective of the entire hour, but you can see generally everything is working well. The platoons are typically able to, at least in this area, they are able to clear within 1 cycle length. And now we're getting into the impacts starting downstream here. So we did have improvements at Gumtree, which are reflected here. And then you can start to see here those downstream impacts as you look towards past Gumtree, up towards Wilbourn Road. We are starting to experience some queuing at this point. You can see some long queues at Wilbourn and Jarvis Park. Also through Pembroke at this point too. You can see a constant stream of vehicles. And there you can see the side street is largely able to clear. And then as we move forward, granted, we don't have that platoon at the moment, because again, this is just one instant in time. You can see that platoon ahead, and it's largely dissipated by the time it hits Indigo Run. So we do tend to see a lot of the impacts of our modified alternative 1 centered around Pembroke as that tries to accommodate that additional traffic. So we can move to the next video as well. And this is along the Cross Island Parkway here at Arrow Road. So this is again during the morning. We're headed southbound here. As you can see, there's quite a few southbound vehicles. At this point in time, the side streets are able to make their turns, but I'll talk a little bit more later on the impacts to those side streets. One thing that you will start to notice as we approach the target road is that this southbound queue begins to queue past this intersection. And that is one of the findings that we found so far is the roundabout at Sea Pine Circle really struggles to accommodate the volumes under the 2045 scenario. And you can see that right here. So we have the southbound queues extending past Target and even past some of the other intersections as well. And again, I'll go over those results some more in detail after this. This kind of can help you visually see some of the struggles that this roundabout is having. So we have the southbound traffic with a long queue. We also have the eastbound traffic there showing a long queue as well. Okay, then we can go to the next video, which shows the PM peak hour. So we're back to Hilton Parkway on this one, starting at Indigo Run, and this is the PM peak hour for the modified alternative 1. So we can start to see, again, starting at Pembroke and Wilbourn, some queuing. Again, they're largely able to clear the intersections within 1 cycle length here, but this is some of the downstream impacts that we have noticed, as there are some longer queues. You can see the steady westbound traffic here. And we'll try to follow this platoon a little bit. They were able to clear Gumtree Road. And now we're showing Spanish Wells. So yeah, as you look forward in this, you can see a steady stream of westbound traffic. And they're largely able, thanks to the help of the adaptive signals and the extra capacity of the 6 lanes, they're largely able to flow freely through this area. And that agrees with the travel time runs that I just presented to you. Once they start hitting the greens, we're able to get them through these intersections now. And this will follow through to Moss Creek. So as you can see here, largely expected to operate acceptably all the way from beginning at our Gumtree through Moss Creek here. You can see the platoon is starting to clear from that signal, which just turned green. And then we have one more video for you, which is the PM along Cross Island Parkway. And here at the very beginning, you can already see some of the queuing that we're realizing in the 2045 scenario at Sea Pine Circle. So both of our eastbound and westbound directions are really struggling to get into this roundabout due to the large number of vehicles entering in. They just can't find a gap to get in there. But one thing that's different here in the PM as it is in the AM is while there's queuing issues at the roundabout, as you've seen along Cross Island Parkway, Palmetto Bay at this point, there's not too many issues here from what we can see in the PM. The queuing all happens, outside of it, whereas opposed to in the morning, there was queuing southbound along this road because the roundabout was pushing it here. Here it's the other directions that are having some impacts just because of the direction of the flow in the AM and the PM. We would expect that, and as I'll get into a little bit later, any improvements to Sea Pines would help mitigate all of these issues that we're seeing here. Okay. So now to put some numbers to this, the operating conditions results from VISM for the modified alternative 1 are provided in these tables here. We have included the operating conditions for each intersection in the appendix of this presentation for reference. However, we've provided the results for intersections of note here, some of our key intersections that we're looking at. So as shown here, the intersections between Squire Pope and Gumtree are expected to operate acceptably overall during the AM and PM peak hours. Each of our signalized intersections is expected to have an LOS D or better, which is our target LOS for an intersection overall. And the individual approaches are expected to operate with a LOS E or better. And as Kate mentioned, that's typically considered acceptable during peak hours for some of the side street approaches. But while the intersections overall are expected to operate acceptably, there are a few movements which we've called out here that are expected to either experience long delays, resulting in an LOSF for that specific movement, again, not necessarily for the approach or for the intersection, or maybe some long queues here. So at Squire Pope, I'll focus here for a minute because this is where we put in one eastbound left turn lane and one southbound right turn lane. And we worked a lot on this intersection, especially with respect to the adaptive signals to help make this intersection run as efficiently as possible. But even still, we are expecting that the eastbound left turn would fail during our AM peak hour. That's largely due to the delay at that point. And then the southbound left turn, part of the capacity with the southbound approach there, is also expected to fail during the PM peak hour. And the southbound right turn, we're expecting to have some long queues of over 500 feet during the PM peak hour. At Spanish Wells, again, largely just due to the way the intersection and the timings and everything, all of the eastbound, westbound, and southbound left turns are expected to fail during peak hours. But if we look at the approach overall, the approaches are operating acceptably at LOS E or better. These are just some movements that we wanted to call out here to bring to your attention as you're making your decisions. And then at Gumtree, we have the westbound left turn is also expected to fail during the AM peak hour. And that's a lot of times largely just waiting for the signal to give them the green. That's whenever it comes to the left turns failing, that's usually what it's down to. So on this slide here, again, we can see overall, if we look at these black bolded numbers for the intersections that are signalized, we're expecting them to operate acceptably. Each of the intersections should have an LOS D or better. Generally, each of the approaches will also have an LOS E or better. There is the exception highlighted in red for the northbound approach at Wilbourn Road and Jarvis Park. Again, before I go any further, we have made no modifications to these intersections here. The intersections in the slide previously had the modified alternative 1 improvements. These intersections have no improvements to them. This is, kind of a no build of the modified alternative 1.
Can I
highlight.
ask you a question?
Yes.
So how does this differ from what we have today?
These have the 2045 traffic volumes in them.
Yeah, so you're operating what, on 4,000 vehicles per hour, or around that number?
In this section, I can pull it up. I wouldn't say 4,000. It's, we have our 2023 existing traffic counts and then 0.56 annually grown up from there. I can get those numbers from you, but you would have to give me a moment to pull it up.
What I would like to understand is, except for the adaptive traffic system, there are no changes in the roadways or left-hand turns, right-hand turns. It's just the same thing we have today, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
These intersections, correct. And that was in an effort to show you, if you make all of these improvements west of Gumtree, what'll happen if you do nothing, essentially, to the intersections east of Gumtree. So we haven't made any physical changes. We haven't, added lanes, changed lanes. We haven't done anything of that. We do have your adaptive signals in here and the 2045 traffic volumes. But otherwise, this assumes essentially you do nothing on these intersections.
Thank you.
But we intend to consider improvements as a next step. That's just
Yes.
further down in task 4.
Yes, this is our initial findings from what we've seen so far. So we have a few callouts here. We are finding that the westbound left turn at Jarvis Park is expected to fail during the AM peak hour. And then the eastbound left turn and northbound through is expected to fail during the PM peak hour of Indigo Run. I also highlighted here, and Kate had mentioned, is, LOS is one of the things that we consider when we're looking at these results, but it's not everything. And especially as you can see here, sometimes if it's just one movement that will fail, it might not necessarily dictate our recommendations for the entire intersection. It's one of the things we look at, but not everything. I did highlight here some cues, which we're seeing may extend into the next intersection. And this is one of the things that we're also looking at as we evaluate some potential improvements here. So the eastbound approach at Jarvis Park and Pembroke, and we're seeing some of this in the videos, is expected to queue beyond that intersection itself. It is largely focused on those two intersections. By the time it gets to Central Avenue at 15, the queues are starting to dissipate. There's enough room for the signal Indigo Run for everything to kind of, go through. But we are starting to see some queuing issues at Jarvis Park and Pembroke. And that's same for the westbound direction, where we've highlighted at Jarvis Park that queue of 1,202 feet. Again, these are the maximum views. Maximum queues that we're seeing here. So this is kind of the worst case of what we're seeing on these intersections here. And then I've also called out the Sea Pine Circle. And as you saw in the video, there's a lot of queuing that we're seeing at this circle, and as we're expecting in 2045. Again, we've made no modifications to the lanes here or to any of the striping. This is assuming it is as it is today, only with the 2045 traffic volumes. And you can see in the morning we have some approaches failing. It's that eastbound approach, and that's what we saw in the video. The southbound approach is not failing. However, we saw long queues for that southbound approach, and those queues then hurt those side street approaches as they struggle to find a gap in those queue lengths because of the roundabout to make a left turn out of an unsignalized approach. So some of those intersections further north, like Genesta, as those queues on the southbound approach extend all the way back there, they start to struggle to make a left turn out. So we would assume, or we would say, whenever we improve this roundabout, that a lot of those issues that we're seeing would be mitigated simply by fixing this roundabout. We might not actually need to look at or improve any of those other intersections. But again, we're still testing some ideas here. So as far as next steps, We've shown you the results of the modified alternative 1, and we've shown you kind of the impacts that it's having on the intersections downstream of Gumtree Road and Cross Island Parkway. I've highlighted a few things for you today that we're looking at further to see, what, if any, improvements we could make that might help them out. And these improvements include reconfiguring intersections or, turn lanes, potentially to improve some efficiency there. We may also look at the addition of lanes to help improve capacity. But then most certainly we are looking at improvements to the Sea Pines roundabout. As we've seen, that roundabout is really performing the worst out of all the study intersections at this point. So we're going to be looking at that closely. And that's everything that I have for you. So we're happy to take questions.
Questions from the committee?
So with these, you were talking about these improvements on that preferred alternative from SCDOT. Have you evaluated that? Have you put in all these different ideas to see what that would do to the traffic volume?
So the traffic volumes would stay the same. That's kind of one thing that's held true this entire study. Yes, the flow of traffic. We have put in all of the SCDOT's modified preferred alternative, all of their recommendations that came out of there. That is now in our VISM model, as well as the modifications we mentioned. Squire Pope now is only going to have that one eastbound left turn lane as well as the one southbound right turn. So that is in our VISM model. And we also have the improvements at Gumtree, which we recommended as part of our task 3 in there. And those are the only improvements right now that are in our VISM model. We have started to model some potential improvement for the other intersections downstream and Sea Pines. We just haven't finalized those models to present results yet.
And what about when you go westbound from the Cross Island Parkway onto the Business 278? That's right now is one lane. Have you tested on the model what it would do if you have 2 lanes coming down into 278?
No, we left that the same.
Why not, if I may ask?
I believe. From what we're showing here, it's not needed.
Not needed?
The widening? And can you clarify the location again? I want to make sure that I have that right.
Michelle, I think what he's referring to is you come off of the Cross Island Parkway and get ready to get on
Yes.
the William Hilton Parkway. There's pavement that has been striped to direct everybody into one lane as you enter onto William Hilton Parkway. Dietrich is asking if we modeled it as 2 lanes. And I remember, was it Jim you'd mentioned that spoke with Darren historically that it used to be 2 lanes, but then there was a concern with weaving, trying to get up to the next one. And it was problematic, causing accidents. And that's why it went down to 1 lane.
So it has not been tested in your VISM or model?
We
No.
modeled what was the SCDOT.
But to clarify, Michelle, the VISM model is showing that it flows appropriately?
Yes, and we can go back to those videos too. It should have that in there.
Because it seems a very
well.
obvious solution to relieving some of the congestion. So I'm just wondering why that wasn't really.
Well, as we improve the intersection of Spanish Wells, that helped a lot. We weren't seeing a lot of the same queuing and congestion as you're seeing today, and as we saw in the 2045 no build or in the PM.
Now, if you have a 3-lane bridge with a breakdown lane, how do you model that into the overall traffic flow if you're going to have that go into 2 lanes? Or 3 lanes initially and 2 lanes, doesn't that create a form of congestion? In other words, is there a real need for 3 lanes and a breakdown lane? Or 2 lanes and a breakdown lane that converts into a regular roadway during peak hours? In other words, what's your argument for having 3 lanes and a breakdown lane? Have you evaluated that? Do you have a conclusion on that?
I think we're trying to go back to topics we've already covered in prior discussions up to this point, there is not a proposed situation where the bridge would be 3 lanes in each direction flowing into a 2-lane in each direction receiving roadway. As you indicated, that would cause congestion, and that's not what Alternative 1 suggests. Alternative 1 suggests that the on-ground roadway also be widened to be, 3 lanes in each direction to receive the proposed bridge lanes. So no, that was not modeled, but that's not currently an alternative that is being proposed.
Yeah, I think everybody is a bit of a traffic engineer, and but we are not. And so, from a novice point of view, you would think that if you have this slab of a bridge coming down with 3 lanes, having to force itself into a smaller roadway, that creates issues, no?
I don't think that's a proposed solution.
I know, but I mean, we'd like to have your view on that, and as a consultant.
Certainly, yes. Our view is that that would not be, that certainly would not be an agreeable final solution. All the solutions that have been proposed that we've modeled in any of the alternatives 1 through 4 that you've seen, or alternative 1 that we're talking about specifically today, they would not have that condition. They would have the 3 lanes in each direction on the bridge, and that would meet up with 3 lanes in each direction on the roadway on the ground.
And now that we're on the topic, have you had the experience of converting one breakdown lane into a regular roadway during peak hours on other projects, and how did that work, if you have that done?
That was not a situation that we modeled here, but if the suggestion is to have a breakdown lane, as you're referring to it, open on the bridge for hours during congestion, but then kind of closing it when there are non-peak hours, you still are going to require a 3-lane roadway section of the main Hilton Parkway to handle all of that congestion traffic. So if you have 3 lanes, in each direction, so a total of 6 lanes for the main part of the roadway that's on the ground, our professional opinion would be it does not make sense to have a 2-lane bridge meet up with that. And if you need 3 lanes to meet the congestion, your main pinch point is at that bridge. So if you have a 3-lane roadway that funnels into a 2-lane bridge, it works both ways. You're concerned about having a 6-lane bridge funnel into a 4-lane roadway section. It would work the opposite way as well. We think that it is most practical and best engineering judgment to have the bridge and the roadway cross section match each other.
I have a question about what you just talked about. Why wouldn't the approaches to the bridge have the same configuration as the bridge?
They should. Yes, I agree.
Okay, so then why couldn't that breakdown lane, as Dietrich is saying, continue as an emergency lane?
I'm not sure I follow. I think it does.
Well, you just said that we have 3 lanes and a breakdown lane on the bridges, on a bridge going across. So you had said that would be the same on the approaches. So why wouldn't you continue the emergency lane, let's say, during the peak hours in that framework?
I think our terminology is perhaps a little different, but I do believe we're talking about the same thing. What has been referred to as a breakdown lane on the bridge, in technical terms, is a shoulder that is wide enough for an emergency vehicle to pass by in a crash incident. So there are also shoulders proposed for the rest of the roadway off of the bridge. So there's shoulders on the bridge as proposed. There's shoulders off of the bridge as proposed. I do believe that the currently proposed alternative, the cross sections meet up, the lanes meet up, the shoulders meet up. That is what is currently proposed to be provided as part of this alternative 1.
So what would be the width of the shoulder, say?
That, is a design detail that is finalized in different phases of the project, and that is a standard that would be determined by the SCDOT manuals.
What does the manual say?
And I can handle that. So the original design that was presented for the bridges included three 12-foot lanes in each direction. It included two 10-foot shoulders or breakdown lanes in each direction. That comes from the Federal Highway Guide,
Yeah, I get that.
which you are probably aware of. There was a request to reduce the two breakdown lanes or shoulders from both at 10 feet to reduce the interior one to something less than 10 feet. There's been agreement, and in the current version that's been presented by SCDOT and the county back in March of 22, and what's currently included in the design is one 10-foot shoulder on the exterior side of the bridge in each direction, and one 6-foot interior shoulder on the interior side in each direction on the bridge. So with the town's input from 2021 through design modifications in 2022, the overall bridge width shrunk by 4 feet in each direction, 8 feet total, and in the multi-purpose pathway, 14 feet to 12. So there's been a reduction in 10 feet of bridge width over the original version that was shared in July of 2021.
So there's a 10-foot shoulder on the right-hand side.
10-foot shoulder on the right side and 6-foot shoulder on the left side.
And that would continue onto the land.
There's a little more width needed, I think, on the bridge. The shoulder on the interior, as you move on, there's more room to get around vehicles, right? Because there's no, you don't have that same condition as you do on the bridges. But yes, there are shoulders on both the interior and exterior of the roadway through the balance of the
All right,
project.
so then, just, again, continuing with Deidre's question then, why wouldn't that fourth lane, the right-hand shoulder, continue as an emergency or a breakdown lane or as an additional lane during peak hours off the bridges?
There's other access points that occur outside of the bridge that require moving across those lanes. So if you are using them only for peak hour traffic, there's some concern about using them in off-peak hour when you've got to cross to access other points along the corridor as well. So again, the 3 lanes in each direction are what have been recommended by the several different versions of the engineering studies that have been done. Reversible lanes have been looked at, and I do understand the question about utilizing the breakdown or larger shoulder for a peak hour implementation, and that is not supported from what's been presented to this point.
I always say where there's a will, there's a way.
And what's not supported? What do you mean it's not supported?
Well, as I understand Federal Highway, I'll just use the Crazy Crab. If that was a through lane for inbound in the morning, then you would be prevented turning into the Crazy Crab or any other place because there'd be no turns. All traffic has to keep going. And Federal Highway says no to that.
Crazy Crab doesn't have breakfast.
It doesn't have to be Crazy Crab. It could be the house along there or houses. Any of those, you would not be able to, as I understand the Federal Highway, you're not able to make any turns if you have a throughput roadway. If it's a shoulder, you can make a turn.
I'll also just add that at some point, the traffic would be required to merge back into a regular, quote unquote regular, all the time this is a travel lane rather than just, a breakdown lane or a peak hour lane. At some point it would require a merge back onto the regular roadway if the shoulders are used in that purpose. And the merging of a large volume of vehicles is an unsafe condition that already exists in some areas on the corridor. So to increase the instances of requiring people to merge, would potentially have a negative safety implication for the corridor. Or the other side of that coin is that if people would experience that merge, it's difficult to get in, nobody wants to let me in, there's too much traffic, I'm never going to get over in that lane, nobody's using it. You would not have full utilization of that lane, and then it's, you don't have the capacity that you really think you do.
Help me understand this. So if you have 2 lanes and a breakdown lane, and you turn the breakdown lane into a regular roadway, that's 3 lanes. If you have 3 lanes in a breakdown lane, either way, it has to merge in the end into 2 lanes. I mean, that problem doesn't go away. So the size of the bridge is of great concern to a lot of residents on the island. And so I think we need to explore really whether that's a real possibility. I mean, to have 2 lanes in a breakdown lane, so 6 lanes, is a hell of a lot different than having a huge slab coming across from the mainland. And so if there's any way that we can, with today's technology, have 2 lanes in a breakdown lane, have the breakdown lane a bit wider so that it can be turned into an additional roadway, I think that'd be a pretty good solution.
But the breakdown lane would have a Jersey barrier on one side of it, correct?
Sorry?
The breakdown lane would have a Jersey barrier on one side of it, correct?
I'm not familiar with the Jersey barrier.
So essentially the concrete, like abutment, right? So if people utilize that as a travel lane, they're gonna be traveling 45 miles an hour on one side, being that far away from a concrete structure, and then in between another consistently full travel lane. And so those are intended to be, again, in emergency situations, not to have people driving 45 miles an hour adjacent to a concrete abutment that's inches away from their vehicle. So that's what Kate's alluding to, is we do not feel that's a safe condition to consider.
So, I mean, so what can you do? I mean, how can you make that?
If I could jump in, just for one other point. So we've had 1,100 collisions in this corridor since 2016. The majority of those collisions occur during peak hour traffic. And so if you're using the breakdown lane as a through traffic during the peak hour, you no longer have the emergency lane for emergency vehicles to access. It's being utilized for travel, for flow. So you've eliminated the ability to provide emergency access or for existing traffic to move around an incident by utilizing that during the time when you need it the most. So and then that's why Federal Highways has the requirement to have the breakdown lane when they build bridges at, and have the configuration that is required for the capacity on the bridge.
Yeah, but you can, I mean, Charlie, you know more about bridges and roads. You can have lane indicators. I mean, I would like to see the town really find a solution to this kind of thing, rather than trying to constantly aim for this 8-lane bridge. I mean, if there is a way that we can reduce the size of the bridge, it becomes much more palatable to most of our residents. And so if you have lane indicators, or I don't know what you can put in as road furniture to make that a possibility, have we really explored this? I think that's very important. Anyone?
Yeah, I'll have one additional comment. So utilizing a third lane during peak hour was discussed early through this process. We're in year 7 of discussions on this project. One of the biggest issues is during non-peak hours. Well, one, not having the emergency lane when you need it the most during peak hours is a significant reason why it doesn't make sense to utilize that lane during peak hour. During non-peak hours, the ability, unless there's a physical barrier, the ability to keep people off it that have driven it in peak hour traffic, to not utilize that during off-peak hour, is a significant issue. And that was brought up that without a significant enforcement presence out there, you are going to have in essence, people using 3 lanes at all times. So it has been evaluated. I think the peak hour use of an emergency lane versus having an emergency lane when you need it is a significant reason to make sure the breakdown lane is part of the bridge design.
It's easier to shoot it down than to be creative about it. And I mean, if you've ever been on the BQE and there's an accident there, and that's pretty intense traffic, they find a way around it. Why can't we think creatively about, and I'm really looking at Mueller, about minimizing the width of the bridge?
We've indicated that 3 dedicated travel lanes are needed. And as I mentioned before, my professional opinion is that if you were to echo what Sean said, is if we quote unquote allow people to utilize a breakdown lane as a thoroughfare lane, 45 miles an hour or more on a consistent basis with a concrete abutment adjacent to them, you are going to lead to multiple accidents, in my opinion. I think it's an extremely unsafe condition. So then if you use that travel lane to abide by federal highways requirements, you're going to have to provide some type of shoulder because they're not going to allow you to have a travel lane right next to a roadway abutment. So then you still have to extend out from that travel lane, and then you're essentially a 3-lane section. The question would be, what's the allowable shoulder width that you have to have on a critical bridge like this? And that's why they've arrived at, it sounds like they've accommodated a lower interior shoulder, but then they are maintaining standard design outside shoulders.
I don't want to beat it to death, Nate, but so how wide does a breakdown lane have to be in order to let it be converted into a roadway during peak hours?
What federal highways would allow for a bridge to be I think there's a differentiation needs to be stated between a regular or in emergency situations. And I think that, in my professional opinion, it needs to be moving forward as an emergency situation, not a lane that would be used as a thoroughfare on a daily basis during peak hours.
So here's my question to you and Mueller. Can they, because I'm putting you on the spot, sorry, but maybe can you discuss this with your colleagues and see if there is a solution to it? Because I think it's an important thing, Mr. Mayor, as well, to find ways to reduce the size of the width of the bridge, because it's going to have a lot of pushback from many, many people.
It's my understanding that those discussions have been had, that they've been amenable to reducing them even further than what's been in March 22. They've reduced them down to what they feel comfortable. And we feel that there needs to be 3 dedicated travel lanes. So it's really a function of what is acceptable from a shoulder standpoint, and they provided that input to Sean.
What would be the effective lane width of a barrier next to a 10-foot lane?
To the right side, if it's a 10-foot, that sounds appropriate to me. Because again, it's for emergency situations for people to pull over to get off of the travel stream. 10 feet is think of a parking stall. A parking stall is probably about 8 feet in width. 10 feet is the minimum travel lane width that we would recommend in a sleepy neighborhood corridor. So if you think about a 10-foot on a heavily congested bridge, that's about the minimum that I would feel comfortable recommending. I cannot speak with specificity on what the federal highways is. I don't have that document in front of me. I'm just speaking based on past experience.
And the Jersey barrier at the base is 18 inches. So if you put a Jersey barrier up, you're already looking at 1.5 feet you have to accommodate.
And I apologize for maybe the misnomer. The Jersey barriers that just came to mind. In my world, those are the concrete barriers they put during temporary construction, right? Essentially, that's a bridge abutment. A concrete bridge abutment is probably the best terminology.
We have Jersey barriers that they actually slide back and forth during.
Correct. So
and you see that up north quite a bit. But still, they're
maneuverable.
18-inch base.
And there's traffic right next to them.
But usually in slower conditions, they're put up in temporary traffic control conditions where the They're reduced
Not
down
on
to
the-
30, 35
Not-
miles an
Not
hour.
on the former Tappan Zee Bridge, no.
But if you go to typical construction activities, the typical work zone speed limit is 35 miles an hour or less. And if Jersey barriers are put up on a roadway, they have to have a sufficient distance away from a more heavily traveled corridor. That distance I can't speak to. I honestly don't have that manual in front of me. But I think in this situation, if the concern is to have a narrow footprint, again, that's our professional opinion on the matter.
What's your professional opinion on the 10-foot, 12-foot bike lane? Is that necessary?
The multi-use path that's being
Right,
proposed?
right.
It's it being there, or what are you referring to?
What's the purpose of it, other than, or it's there for the bicyclists or pedestrians? And so what is it, I mean, what's your opinion on that? Should it stay? Is it worth building it, or is it something that is expendable?
I think those are overarching goals that really aren't pertinent to this study. I think from speaking from a resident standpoint, I think it's a very unique idea that will bring great benefit, but that's my personal, not professional opinion. I think there's other overarching things that went into the design of that, the intent of it. But to say that I'm not going, go ahead, Sean.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Nate. I hate to go back too far in time, but there was a previous US 278 corridor committee appointed by council. They had 26 public meetings, and in the recommendations that were included in discussion from that committee and then to town council included the provision of a multi-use pathway on the southern side of the bridge. It's included for that reason. Beaufort County has a Beaufort County Connects plan, which is aimed to provide additional connectivity throughout the entire county. And one of the goals in that plan was to connect Hilton Head with the mainland of Beaufort County. And the pathway on the southern side of that bridge is a way to do that. So from a traffic flow, from an engineering, is a bike and ped facility needed to accommodate the congestion and additional capacity needed? No. But there was a lot of public input that led to it being included into the current design.
Other comments? Any other questions? Yeah, do you have any more?
So I'm still confused about where all of this is heading, and the fact that we are haven't really delved into many of the issues. My obvious remark is that we have, in my opinion, two options. One is alternative one, which doesn't change much in the overall layout of the roads, and except that we have new bridges. And then the second option is to have the new version of the Southern Bypass. Now, I know that this has been discussed many times, but the new version of the bypass, and I'm number one is the fact that it has zero impact on Stony. We don't have to go into mitigation exercise. We don't touch any of the Stony land. Number two, we don't have any issues with the right-of-way. It'll be a semi-elevated bypass. It has very little, almost insignificant environmental impact. It doesn't go into Honeyhorn, and it connects directly into the Cross Island Parkway. So, for the life of me, I do not understand why this isn't embraced by many people. especially our town government and administration. If you put that next to the alternative one that doesn't connect into the Cross Island Parkway, it doesn't have any changes. It has actually very few modifications on the what we have today. So here we have a chance to change that, especially since 50% of the traffic goes over the Cross Island Parkway. Why don't we have in this exercise a direct connection into the Cross Island Parkway? It is really beyond me, and I'm also confused because now I hear of different plans being floated around with the town council that we have not been privy to. It's sort of jumping the gun on many levels, and I can assure you that the residents, who are really the people that we are concerned about, will have questions and will have pushback on these things. So, to me, a semi-elevated southern bypass tying directly into the Cross Island Parkway, taking 50% of the traffic off the 278 business, it's such a logical way to resolve this issue. And I would love to hear on why we are not making that a serious alternative. The other alternatives that are being presented, the totally elevated highway, is to me a bit of a pie in the sky, and the other alternatives were really just there to fill the mission of looking at 4 alternatives. So, and I would welcome to hear from you, Mr. Mayor, or from Ed Warner or Charlie, on your views on this. This is why we're here. This is why we have to actually have a dialogue rather than have a one-way communication.
I'll ask y'all if you have any comments on that first.
I think the Southern Crossway, or whatever you want to call it has some intriguing points to it. However, I put on my contractor's hat and thought about my experience on Alaskan Pipeline and a few other big projects. And I picked up the phone and called a good friend who has been in elevated highways doing piling. And he walked me through the steps. I've never bid on one. By the way, if I was a contractor, I would take that project in a heartbeat, cost plus. I can see cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. I would make money. I could retire, and my whole crew would retire. Here's the issue. We heard that the elevated highway was going to be the most expensive. Well, double the price to do what you're talking about, Diedrich, because number one, you're going to put crane mats down to get out into that area where it's, you call semi-elevated, anything is elevated. You're going to have to go down. I was told that the Bluffton Parkway, they had to go 30 feet. So if you use that as a guesstimate, your pillars are going to have to 30 feet before you're going to hit what they call, it wouldn't be solid rock, but it would be load-bearing material. And again, to get the machinery out there, you're putting down crane mats, which is very, very expensive. Then when you get to where you're going to land, if you use Honeyhorn as an example, in talking to people, and I've been out when the concourse has been at Honeyhorn, or even now where they park the 18-wheelers to bring the cars in, you notice after they leave, there's 3 to 4 inch ruts from those trailers. So definitely Honeyhorn, and you take it further south, the land has got to be similar, so it's not load bearing. So in a quick estimate, you could have up to, 30,000 cubic yards of material you're going to have to excavate. Sure, we don't want that the southern part of the island. I don't know, maybe someone, the rest of the island wants to stock 30,000 cubic yards for us. Now you take that out, you bring in the same amount, which has got to be what they call structural fill. So every point I've made, it's cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. the cash register is going up and up and up. So in my mind, right away, it's got some good ideas to it, but boy, I don't know if the taxpayers want to pay that money. I certainly would vote against that because of the cost. And
One of
that
the
is
things,
my biggest concern, that there's no consideration floating this out there, that there's been no soil testing. We have to go based on general knowledge of the community. And I don't think it's a viable solution.
And you hardly go into wetlands. It actually also opens it up. You can turn it into a toll road. So because it's a new road, apparently under it's allowable.
I understand a toll road has to go before the state
have that done,
legislature
and
to be approved.
It doesn't infringe on Honeyhorn. The only thing that needs to be figured out is how you merge it back, going westward, back onto the 278. So you don't want to have it run all the way on 278. You want to have it merge in, and there will be 2 lanes with a middle breakdown. So.
You're missing my point, Dietrich. I said it has viable solutions. My point is the cost to build this. I would take it as a contractor, cost plus 10, 15, and I would become a millionaire because it is going to be very, very expensive.
Yeah, well, we need to put the numbers on it, but I think that's secondary.
I have no problem with at least considering a study of it. In fact, at the last meeting, which I wasn't here, I understand I offered a proxy, and I understand it was legally incorrect or something to do a proxy for us as a committee or something like that.
I'm not sure.
Anyway, yeah, I'm supportive of doing an evaluation of that southerly bypass. Just to put it to rest, or to put it to fruition. So that's where I stand.
Well, I think you're incorrect in saying that it doesn't affect many historical property and culturally sensitive property. So the impact is much greater than going through alternative modified number 1. Yes.
I have to correct you. This drawing is the old one. So the later version.
Again, the
There's only
version's
one version
changed.
that is an improvement on this, which has runs closer to the 278. I mean, for God's sake, I mean, we have to really take this serious. I mean, it's a very good
and we
solution. And from what we as
we have done,
amateur.
we have looked at every single property that would be impacted, not only for this southern bypass, but for the entire project. And we know, well, we don't know because the final design's not done yet, but we have a good indication as to the amount of property that is required for every area. And this bypass, whether this design or another, has greater impact than alternative number 1.
Either you or me are ill-informed. I'm serious.
John?
Yeah, if I could jump in and listen, I appreciate the input from the technical working group and all others that have provided input. We need to stop making statements that are not based in fact. I've heard that the southern bypass, and this was provided by the technical working group. I know it's changed. It's changed many times.
No, it's changed once.
No, sir. I have versions of this.
I don't want to be,
Please let me finish.
well, I mean, you're throwing things out that are untruths, and I have a.
I
I'm
will
allergic
only
to that
state
kind of thing.
facts, and please, with respect.
Oh, don't pull the wool over my eyes, Sean. I've been there many times.
Well, I heard a comment that there are no impacts from this project.
But no impact on?
I've got points that you made. No impacts. No
No
right-of-way,
impact on
no-
stony land. Zero.
All of that is stony land. All of that property.
Don't look at that drawing. And we've distributed the other drawing to the town council.
You're missing the point, that everything in that purple shaded area is within the traditional cultural property. It is comprised of big and little stony communities. Any impact within that area, regardless of whether it's town or privately held, is an impact to that traditional cultural property. So we can't say there are no impacts. There are impacts. That would be a new roadway alignment outside of the Hilton Parkway current right-of-way that would impact properties. At the request of the committee, we had Mueller do an evaluation of this configuration. It was presented to the committee. There were additional 8 private properties impacted, I believe, with their own assessment, and up to additional 6 acres of property.
That's based on the old one. Look, I don't want to get into a contest with you here.
I'm asking for some respect here. You made a statement, there's no impacts in Stony. There are impacts in Stony. That there's no right-of-way needed to do this project. All of that requires right-of-way. A new roadway is going to require dedicated right-of-way to install the project. No honeyhorn impact. Honeyhorn impact, it means if you impact 1 square foot of that property, not if it impacts the area where they hold festivals. This, I know it's been changed, but this configuration would never be permitted in that alignment. It needs to tie back into the business route in Cross Island, and would require an overpass at Spanish Wells and tie back.
You're reading from the wrong chart. I'm sorry. I mean, you can go on.
Well, I'm going to go on. It does impact Honeyhorn, which is another 4F resource. The entirety of that purple traditional cultural property is a 4F resource. Any impacts within that area are critical to being able to go through the NEPA process. One charge at the very beginning of the scope of work that this committee recommended and town council approved was that it had to make it through the NEPA process. Mueller did an evaluation, and I can let them speak and elaborate on it. They gave you a very detailed breakdown of the risks and the ability for the southern bypass to be considered and go through the NEPA process and gain an approval. They also submitted a technical memorandum, which is included in the packet, on May 13th with their position on why they didn't believe an additional modeling of this was necessary. Toll road, can we go back to the other graphic name? I'm sorry. A toll road. I commute. I would not pay a toll to bypass a couple hundred feet of roadway. I do not experience congestion between Squire Pope Road and Spanish Wells Road when I come through and connect to the Cross Island. It's already 6 lanes in that section. It's already 6 lanes in that section. That is not a section where the current project is even asking for additional capacity. So I want to make sure that we are all moving forward with some specific facts here. Mueller said it's about another 6 plus or minus acres based on what we have on the screen. At the request of Mr. Bear, he had asked MKSK to take a look at the alignment. I provided this to him. I had them draw up what they thought was a alignment that was more palatable. I offered to meet with Mr. Bear and the technical working group and had a meeting scheduled for Monday, and he declined.
Excuse me, we didn't call for that meeting. You called for that
I
meeting.
asked to go over that.
He's traveling, so don't give me that. And
Please some respect. Please some respect. I'm just making some factual statements here. I offered to go through with Mr. Bear this iteration and the latest one that was submitted, along with what MKSK, our consultant, had come up with, so that we understand when we're out in public, when we're saying there are no impacts to Stony, that no right-of-way is needed, there's no impact to Honeyhorn, that you can include a toll to help pay the additional cost. A lot of that information is not accurate. And it's a shame that we are having these conversations about trying to fit a solution that's on the screen here or something close as the solution and then and try to engineer back into it. We've had Lockmueller do an independent assessment, including end-to-end downstream impacts. They have done it without bias and without any outside influence. They've performed the scope of work that was approved by the committee and by town council and presented their findings. I'll let them speak on whether or not they would, in their professional opinion, see any reason to advance this. But you've asked, they've responded. And I want to make sure that everyone has a understanding of the facts about impact, what the 4F resource means. If you have any more impact within that traditional cultural property, which used to be all owned or almost all owned by Native Islanders, and the fact that the town has got as property in that area doesn't change the designation. And it doesn't mean you can try to weave a alignment in just on town property to implement a project and say there's no impact. So those are my comments, and thank you, sir, for the time.
Nate, if you'll address that for everybody's benefit.
Chad, can you hear me?
Address it with the right information. So if I put these two against each other, alternative one, which to me is same old, except for an 11-lane bridge, has not proven to do anything to us. And I put it against an idea that actually is novel and solves problems. Then why are we not all sort of chasing after it to see if it really works? But there is so much pushback from the town that I don't know why they ignore these plans. No impact on Stony, no impact on Honeyhorn, no environmental impact, on and on and on it goes. To me, and the cost factor, we have to figure it out. You know, on a $423 million project, it's a drop in the bucket.
Chad,
And I'm glad that there are so many people from the town council here, because it's an important thing to decide upon. It's not something we need to sort of talk over and put away. It's too big of a thing, and the wrong decision on this thing is going to come back to haunt you, everyone.
I think there has been a tremendous amount of homework done looking into this from the engineers that understand what it takes to do something like this. And as you have stated before, y'all are not highway engineers. You know, I lean towards those consultants and professionals that have an understanding in how to look at these. That's what I have to, you know, I'm not an engineer by any means, and I look at this and I see a greater impact to the community for less than a mile. And I mean, it is Stony property.
So if you take it a level up, it's really, and we had the discussion in the past, it's all about the community. So we are a community. If we don't care for our community, we might as well go move somewhere else. And here, our traditional community is important. This alternative will not affect them. The other ones, you have 21 properties that you affect. Well, why are we not taking that seriously? And I'll leave it at that.
We are taking that very seriously, and that is why there's an alternative modification of number one, which is almost to a zero impact. It is continually being looked at and
How do you get
addressed.
zero impact then? I mean, what's zero impact? I mean, aren't you
Because-
affecting 21 properties? Aren't you having a mitigation effort going on to
We are looking at it. Nothing is designed yet. And this is, you know, listen, nothing is designed yet. And we're working hard with the Stony residents. We're working hard with everybody, and really at staff, to make certain that whatever, however they're affected, it is minimalized. And it is a constant conversation. There is no desire to take any additional land like this proposal does.
This proposal doesn't take any additional land. Zero.
I'm sorry, I see that it does,
If you consider land that's acquired by the town,
which is still,
that where
TCP?
there are no buildings on it,
oh,
as infringement on.
you're
on
cutting
this
people's
whole-
properties in half here, you're cutting away access.
And Dietrich, if I own that property and it's going to the state to build a highway, or if the town owns the property and it's going from the state, that is a transfer of property. That is a right-of-way. I mean, I don't know how to explain it any simpler. I learned that, 10 years old when I was learning to survey. You're taking this piece of property and you're changing the name. That's a change of right-of-way, okay? But I have a question for Sean. If we went with this, from my understanding of both EPA, federal highway, we start back at square one with permit process. Is that not correct?
I know Chad with Mueller, when they presented the findings, and he can probably speak to this, he did a risk assessment that was included in evaluation of this. And he mentioned this would be a significant change, likely requiring an EIS, which would further delay the project. When we talk about access, I mean, this is the Mueller evaluation, not Sean's evaluation. If you look at the dots that are pink on the southern side, you can see that, by having, and at one point this was an at-grade bypass until it was pointed out that there's a lot of private property owners that have property along the waterfront, and then it became an elevated bypass. You can look at all the pink dots on that screen that would now have an elevated roadway they'd either have to drive under or deal with in their current location. So again, I think if you ask the property owners there, is there an impact? The answer would be yes. And there's certainly a physical impact just in right-of-way alone to be able to execute a project, whether it's drawn like this or a slightly different alignment. And this was evaluated by Mueller. It was not recommended for advancement by Mueller. And I know the request keeps coming in to look at it again and have Mueller look at it again. And I'll have them speak to whether or not they believe it should be evaluated.
Just a quick follow-up. My study indicates, in talking, been in this business a long time, I know a few EPA and I know a few federal highway people, that if you start from scratch, EPA is 7 to 10 years. Folks in the audience, I want you to know that. If we go with something like this, I said it intrigues me, we're looking at EPA studies 7 to 10 years before we get the okay. Federal highway, 5 years for them to even get it through their system. So 5 years? Think about that. I mean, intriguing, but is it an easy fix? I don't know. I doubt it.
So what I'd like to do is to answer your question, Dietrich, in terms of maybe why we haven't evaluated it even more thoroughly. And then I'm going to go through just a few bullet points that I've written down, but then Chad's on the call as well, and he's going to elaborate on some of the environmental points that I'm going to make that were maybe gleaned from the last presentation. So just starting at the very beginning of this process, within the requirement qualifications, there was a desire to make sure that the firm that was selected had significant NEPA experience, that we understood the process of what goes into it. And my hope is that throughout the course of the project, we've conveyed clearly that we'd have a very thorough understanding of all things NEPA. This is by no means our first corridor project. I think that during our interview, we would share with you that we've performed 26 corridor studies in the last 5 years, many of which have the NEPA process. Chad, NEPA is what he lives and breathes every single day. So we have true, thorough NEPA experience that we're bringing to the table. When we met in December during our committee meeting, if you recall, our team sought feedback from the committee to help us provide a hierarchy of different types of treatments, what was most palatable, what was least palatable in terms of different types of improvements, because, we're looking to reduce congestion without increasing capacity. So there was, unique turns, circuitous movements, grade changes, variety of different items. But at the top of the list, and it was very clear following that meeting, was that right-of-way. Public, private, didn't matter. The goal was to minimize right-of-way wherever possible. And then that was reiterated in the February 12th meeting where, Dietrich, if you recall, you'd mentioned that maybe for the group to consider a motion to have an alternative that included no right-of-way impacts at all. In comparison, like through Stony, I believe the SCDOT's alternative was about just under 3.5, I think, acres throughout Stony. And I think that's probably where you were getting at, where you wanted to see no right-of-way at all. And so by that February 12th meeting, we hadn't developed the alternative. So when you hear at the 12th that no right-of-way is desired and reemphasized by the committee that seek to limit right-of-way at all possible, that's what kind of guided us. And so when we came up with our alternatives of 2, 3, and 4, I don't have the slide with me, but I think even the most impactful right-of-way option was a little over an acre being added to what the SCDOT's alternative was going to go through here. To the point of the desire to have an option to maximize throughput, have a direct connection to the Cross Island Parkway, our elevated bypass provided that. We also addressed issues at Gumtree Road. And was that an extremely expensive option? Absolutely. Is it probably aesthetically pleasing to some people? Probably not. What we wanted to do was provide you with information to give that bypass option. I know that Mr. Bear had provided these different options throughout the course, but again, to be transparent, when we received feedback from the committee that limiting right-of-way is of utmost importance, that's just one of the reasons why. We did not get into the environmental component of it. As we shared on May 8th that we did at that time, we just moved forward with the alternatives in an independent fashion. So I think now if we kind of fast forward to the information that we shared at the last meeting, again, we had this up on the screen. A lot of discussions are being had about the residents, north of Stony and the impacts that are being made here. The original SCDOT study was about 3.44, and then as Sean mentioned, they have looked to reduce that by at Squire Pope Road, going down to a single eastbound left and a single southbound right to, I believe, all properties in the northwest quadrant, correct? As you go west, of being able to minimize the right-of-way? Right. Do you have like a number of how much that reduced by chance, or?
The total acreage based on assessment reduced it from 3.4, as Nate mentioned, to 2.89 total acres impacted. The original proposal that was presented for the first preferred alternative was 4.77 acres, reduced down to 3.4 acres with input from the town after the first iteration. And with these design modifications that Nate mentioned, down to 2.89.
So from our perspective, again, just reiterating, the south side is also traditional cultural property, as the mayor alluded to. Like it's this entire area is considered TCP. And from the Federal Highways perspective, from NEPA, right of way is right of way. It doesn't matter if it's publicly or privately owned. That's just the way that it is. And I'll allow Chad to elaborate that here in just a moment. But we provided our 3 alternatives in addition to, per our scope, agreed upon scope, and we felt limited, best balance in our opinion, the traffic operations and limiting right-of-way. We presented those, and even though the evaluation of the southern bypass was not in our scope, we felt that there was benefit to the group on May 8th to go ahead and perform a cursory evaluation of, granted that option, it was one that was different than what you provided to us on May 8th, but we bore that cost, even though it wasn't in our scope, just to provide benefit to the group. And so when we stepped through that, and I'll allow Chad to maybe hit on just some of the high points again, Chad, based on maybe some of the discussions they had today. But I feel that we were pretty clear in that in echoing everybody else, this is TC property. Right-of-way is right-of-way. If we are now down to approximately 2.89 acres along William Hilton Parkway of TCP, if you compare that to now 6 acres that are being impacted, whether or not, and I watched the video in preparation of this meeting. I know that Dietrich provided an updated alignment, and I asked Lauren and Chad to just give their initial thoughts. If it hugs William Hilton Parkway, you may swap out this relocation for this relocation. And so substantially speaking, it will be the same amount of environmental impacts that Chad has spoken to, all of which, in our professional opinion, we came to that meeting saying that we did not feel that the that the federal highways would move it forward because it was too impactful. It's avoid, minimize, and mitigate. And we felt that that would not hold true. Sean, the day of the meeting, 15 minutes before we started, he brought a letter of the review that SCDOT did, and they happened to have just a lot of the same points that we had brought forth. So we did ours independently of that cursory evaluation. It mirrors what the DOT said. And so following the voice vote, we checked with Sean, again, to go to that level of detail of evaluating the alternatives such as we did for alternatives 2 through 4. We bore the cost before, but that was a substantial amount of money to go into that great level of detail with this new alignment. And so we shared what that cost would be, what an anticipated time frame would be to complete that, and that we would need to receive formal direction from town council to be compensated for our time. We were not given direction to do that. But then in this memo that I provided to Sean after the May 8th meeting, more just summarizing the slides that we had before, we do not feel that FHWA and SCDOT will allow it to move forward. They've indicated that it will go up to an environmental impact statement, delaying further the project. And to be completely transparent, we do not feel it's a good use of the town's resources when, in our professional opinion, they will not allow it to move forward. So that's kind of a summation of why. But Chad, could you, I have this slide up. Is there anything that maybe has been said today that you could maybe reemphasize, or something that's worth bringing up that maybe provides clarification?
Thanks, Nate. I don't know. You and Sean did a great job capturing the points here. So I don't know how much I can add. Definitely would have more impact on Stony because, as you guys correctly pointed out, Section 4F does not take into consideration and weigh public and privately owned land any differently. So to that regard, you'd be adding about 6 acres of additional right-of-way from the Stony property into the project, incorporating that into a transportation facility. But the other thing to consider when you do that is it's not just that 6 acres with the southern bypass, but it's that 6 acres needs to be added on to the right-of-way for the rest of the project too. This would only be a piece of the overall project. There's other areas, I believe, within the Stony outside of the southern bypass limits that would still have right-of-way acquired from it. So that 6 acres is only a small piece of the overall. Actually, I should say it's a large piece of the overall right-of-way required from the TCP. I thought it might be maybe helpful to just step back. You know, there's a lot of talk. Nate talked about the qualifications for this contract meaning that consultant was going to provide guidance as to whether something could fill the NEPA process. And I thought it'd be worthwhile just to provide a high level review of NEPA and its flow, its process flow. NEPA is process. So with any project having federal oversight, it enters a NEPA review. And one of the first things you do in that NEPA review is establish a purpose and need, why you need to do something. SCDOT and their consultant established a purpose and need. It was approved by Federal Highway Administration. That purpose and need focused on reducing capacity on US 278 and safety, or reducing congestion, along US 278 and safety concerns. And then also the structural deficiency of the bridges. After you establish a purpose and need, you develop alternatives, define alternatives, and start evaluating whether they meet the goals of the purpose and need, and screen them down into a handful that's reasonable and prudent to advance. This is pretty much what SCDOT did as part of their EA. They started out with a number of alternatives that they evaluated from a high level perspective, whittled them down to a smaller range to carry through more technical studies, because they said these were feasible and prudent to carry forward. Now, as part of this technical analysis, you look at wetland impacts, cultural impacts, all that stuff, human and natural resource impacts, how these alternatives affect those resources. The big key one here, and we've talked about a lot, drilling down into this, is Section 4F. So again, Section 4F is really only going to be applicable to transportation agencies, Federal Highway, FAA, FTA, and FRA. And what is of concern in the law, or what the law says, is that Federal Highway and DOT agencies cannot approve the use of land for publicly owned parks, recreational areas, wildlife, and waterfowl refuges, for public and private historical sites, unless there is A, no feasible and prudent avoidance alternative to the use of the land. I think that's obviously clear there isn't here. The administration determines the use of the property will have a de minimis impact. So de minimis meaning very small amounts of effect to the Section 4F resource. And I would note that that's where SCDOT and Federal Highways are landing right now with Stony, is they're saying it's a de minimis impact. And that was based on that 4 point, let's see, what did I have that in here, Nate? Section 4F. I don't think I had the acreage in this slide, but I think it's like 4.3 acres or something like that, and the 2 relocations, and they thought that was a de minimis still. Any more than that is going to carry it into a higher level of analysis. And as Nate pointed out, SCDOT acknowledged that would likely kick the NEPA evaluation up to an environmental impact statement, which would require many more months, maybe even years, to get through the process. So I think the bottom line here is, yeah, in our professional opinion, we could look at the southern bypass more, but I don't think the end result is going to change, because you already have an alternative identified by SCDOT that they can point to and say, well, wait a minute, we have something that meets the purpose and need of the project and does not impact our 4F resources, or we've taken all approaches to minimize impacts to these 4F resources. Even if you look at it as it stands right now, 4.3 acres is what I think it was. That's less than the 6 acres that would be added with the southern bypass. So that's a minimization effort there. My professional opinion is Federal Highway, SCDOT, and you kind of can glean this from their letter, would not entertain this option for further advancement.
And just a couple points of clarification, Chad. One part of this is with right-of-way is that within the William Hilton Parkway corridor, the right-of-way is already really a transportation use, whereas if you were to go with a new alignment south of William Hilton Parkway, you would need to change it from a non-transportation use to a transportation use, and that's another red flag, correct?
True to a degree. I mean, I'd have to look at all the right of way that's being acquired. I mean, anything outside of what would be a traditional street infrastructure layout, something that's already classified as a transportational facility, would be 4F land acquired, would be a concern. Now, you can certainly acquire land within the transportation footprint, I'll say, and not have it be an issue because it's not converting. When I say the word use, that's talking about conversion from a non-transportation use to a transportation use. It's about incorporating elements of the 4F resource into a transportation facility. When you do that, when you convert something from non-transportation to a transportation use, and it has federal oversight, or at least federal transportation oversight, like we do here, or federal highway, then 4F becomes an issue.
And then one final item, the Honeyhorn Plantation impacts reference, that was because Lauren's determination was that in order to, from an alignment standpoint, geometrically, we would need to tie directly onto the Cross Island Parkway within the Honeyhorn Plantation area. So that's where the denotation is coming from, correct?
Correct. It's not shown on that rudimentary sketch that we had up before here, but yeah, that, but there would have to be some, to tie back into the Cross Island Parkway, you'd have to basically follow that blue line somehow. That would be outside of what would be considered the existing transportation footprint. So you'd be actually incorporating non-transportation 4F land into a transportation facility. Now, once you direct the line back north and connect actually into where it says approximately required tie-in point, that would not be as much of a concern because that is already within a transportation element.
Which is, just for reference, with our elevated bypass, that was the reason that, and we noted that it would impact the Honeyhorn Plantation, but that's why we sought an opportunity to utilize this area that was already designated as a transportation land use.
Yes.
Correct.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I mean, is your colleague still looking at that chart rather than the new one?
I'm sorry?
Is your colleague who's, is he
I don't know.
talking
I've
about
seen the new one.
this slide, these plans, or the new one where the track is completely different?
As we mentioned before, when you provided that prior to the last meeting, there was a new alignment, but as you said, it hugs the William Hilton Parkway corridor. But if you look at that, you're still within all that TCP area. The relocations, if, like, say where the old elementary school is shown, if you move that up, then those green dots that are a private parcel, that are just showing as private parcel, if you bring that up, so now you are impacting them from a relocation standpoint. But regardless, you're still cutting 6 acres within a traditional cultural property. It is still right of way for all these reasons. So no matter what alignment is thrown through there, these hurdles will remain valid that we're outlining.
And within the old elementary school park, that's a separate 4F resource, I should note.
Well, I'm of the understanding that it's only 0.4 acres that we infringe upon on the wetlands. That's it. And the other thing I want to add is that I get I'm of the understanding that the many people in the Stony community prefer the southern bypass option, the later one. And so I think that, you know, we are not working for SCDOT, we're not working for interest groups, GIC, hospitality, the chamber, or other people who try to come up with opinions. We are Hilton Heads, and we want to have the best solution for Hilton Heads, not for SCDOT, not for anybody else. And I think that we're putting the horse in front, the cart in front of the horse when we try to criticize every element that every hurdle that we have to overcome, rather than putting it forward as a really fantastic alternative. And I don't get the fuzzy feeling that people here are really behind it. It's more how do we kill it rather than how do we make it work. And so I'm still unconvinced that the SCDOT alternative is really the best way forward, because it doesn't do anything.
So so I understand, Dietrich, are you saying that the people that you've spoken with, they understand that the right-of-way takings along William Hilton Parkway would be slivers along William Hilton Parkway, that they would prefer to have something that goes completely through relocations within traditional cultural property, as opposed to, and more acreage versus less acreage overall along an already existing roadway? That's what they're saying?
So
And then
don't kill it. Don't kill this plan, because it's a viable plan, and there are many people. We have 11,000 signatures on this petition who don't want to see this.
From the very beginning, we've been
this is not for Lochmuller, more in general, and people need to realize it. I mean, you know,
from the very beginning, everything's been an independent viewpoint. And then I know that there's been discussions about with, you know, the previously submitted synchro findings, is there's maybe a sentiment thinking that there's not enough benefit or reduction in congestion with SCDOT's alternative. And, you know, granted, this is all new information that we provided to you all today, but I think what Michelle went through was, you know, some substantially impactful reductions with the VISIM modeling. So I think it'd be a misnomer to say that it has no positive impact at all. And I know that's new information has just come today, but I don't think that would be a true statement to say either. But we've went beyond our scope to provide these cursory evaluations, and that's our professional opinion.
Charlie, I think you were about to have a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, at the May 8th meeting, I wasn't here. I presume a lot of this took place at that time. So I kind of take back my comment that I made earlier, all right?
About
the fact that I think this thing should be studied. You've already studied it, correct?
outside of our scope, correct,
Yeah, but you did, but it was out of your scope, you studied it, right? And it's more or less, you can't go anywhere with it, right? Can't be done.
In our opinion, there's no alignment that will
Right.
change.
Yeah, okay, I get it.
Correct.
Other comments? So seeing none, Sean, do you have the consideration of a resolution? Do you have that verbiage in front of you? And we will open up for public comment after that is read. No, after it's read.
More thing, there's another loop on the preferred alternative up by Windmill Harbor. A loop that, you showed it on the,
Meandering path, or the meandering alignment.
what is that realignment up there?
That was just more to provide more of a meandering aesthetic feel as you go off.
So as it goes through Jenkins Island?
Yeah,
That was previous council's desire to kind of separate the roads a little bit. That'll be reviewed and looked at to see if it makes sense to do that.
Yeah, I would think not. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir, if I can jump in.
Yeah.
Just provide a more undulating roadway.
And that's what previous council had approved to move forward. But it's going to come back for a discussion again.
I don't see the need, you know.
Yeah, it may not ultimately end in that configuration, but that was based on direction adopted by council in October of 2021.
As an ARP for EZA member, I remember doing a piece of property there for taking.
Right.
Oh, sure, yep.
Several years ago.
Are ready to move on to the next agenda item?
Consideration of a resolution to accept findings of the William Hilton Gateway Corridor Independent End-to-End Analysis.
So I just wanted to walk through the process. The resolution that created the committee required the committee to secure a consultant to adopt a scope of work, recommend an RFQ to town council. That happened. It went out. The committee helped select a consultant. And so I just want to go through the recitals to make sure that we've gone through everything. But on February 21st of 2023, the town council authorized creating the appointment of the Gateway Corridor Committee. On May, and as part of that, it was to outline a scope of work, an RFQ, recommend to council, and then select and procure a consultant to do the independent review based on agreed upon scope of work. On May 12th, the committee recommended unanimously a scope of work to be included in the RFQ. On June 6th, town council unanimously adopted a resolution approving the scope of work and the request for qualifications be solicited to attract qualified consultants. On August 28th, the committee unanimously recommended the town negotiate a contract with Mueller Group. On October 12th, town executed a contract with Mueller Group to perform the independent end-to-end analysis. Since that time, the committee has held 10 public meetings between November 3rd and today, June 12th, to review the consultant's findings and recommendations for the William Hilton Parkway Gateway Corridor independent end-to-end analysis, as well as receive public input. As of today, the consultant has delivered and presented technical reports and deliverables as outlined in the contract scope of work. And so at this point, I'm asking for consideration from the committee to accept the findings and recommendations of the William Hilton Parkway Gateway Corridor independent end-to-end analysis delivered by the consultants. And then secondarily, authorizing the town manager to use this for future planning purposes as well.
Is there a motion? Go ahead.
Comment before we go into.
Let me get to a second first, see if there's a
Okay.
second. Is there a second? All right. No motion, no second.
A motion to.
Okay, there's a
approve the
motion, but
resolution.
no second.
Okay.
Unless, I can't make the second, can I?
You can pass the gavel.
Adam will pass the gavel to you. And I'm going to make this, pardon?
You can pass the gavel to anybody.
Yeah. And I will make that motion to second it. Now, we'll open it up for public comment. How's that?
That's good.
Okay. Public comment.
Well, before that, I would just have one remark, Alan. I don't know what the value is of this resolution, why we have to have a resolution in the first place. If we can't have proxies, if we can't have an officially appointed chairman, if we are just a committee, there's no legal standing. Why do we have to have a resolution?
In the resolution that created the committee, the final element was to work with the consultant to make sure that they were performing in accordance with the agreed upon scope of work, and that the recommendations from the consultants and the committee would come through staff to town council. So I'm asking not whether or not you agree with the findings, because that was not what was asked. It was, do you accept the findings and recommendations that have been delivered from the consultant?
Well, not yet. I mean, to me, we're not done. So, and then to just authorize the town manager to take this and run with it and use it as the Bible for new roadways and bridges, I think is, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So I don't support this. I don't want to put my name to it. And I want the records to reflect that I don't.
My objection is that I don't think enough emphasis was placed on the actual structures. All along, we've dealt with the everything from the Windmill Harbor inland. There was nothing really talked about as far as the bridges go, and I was under the impression we were going to deal with that. I asked questions about it all along, and that's one of my objections, that I'm not really ready to accept your study in that it didn't deal with the structures.
I know that you weren't present at the last meeting, but I did provide a pretty detailed analysis of what we, of our review of the seismic study, and did an analysis, our review, or our opinion of the retrofit and rehab versus building new, and we provided that as a supplementary.
You did, right? That you did. I read that, but I'm saying that to address the actual width of the bridges, the whether it's you have to really replace them or not. I suggested when I met the mayor here over the weekend at a Ace Hardware, I suggested that, I found out the bridges are 30 feet wide or 36 feet wide. Correct?
They're wider than that, the current bridges?
The current bridge is 36 feet wide, right?
It's wider than that with a Jersey barrier and the shoulders?
Well, with
38 to 40 feet with a.
I thought it was between the barriers was 36 feet.
Could be.
Yeah. And I said, why couldn't we put 3 lanes of traffic on that then? And again, your question about, that's why I asked you about effective lane width. When you have a lane right up against the barrier, what's the effective lane width? I don't know. Does it cut it down to 10 feet theoretically? But, so anyway, I didn't get full answers on that whole situation. And that's the first time I posed it, at least with the mayor, over the weekend. Whether, since I was saying, well, if we can't widen the bridges because of the restrictions that you found, then why couldn't we just put 3 lanes on the bridge temporarily? And we could address the approaches accordingly with by having 3 lanes again.
Are you talking about the existing structures?
Existing structures, right? Utilize the existing structures, rehabilitate them as needed. Now, I grant it, they're not going to be seismically, correct. But they've been in the use now for some 40 years. So why couldn't they continue to be in use for the next 20 until we get another structure built on the southern?
Based on the findings of that seismic study, it's that now that the findings have been made known, the do-nothing option of not seismically retrofitting them is not an option. And so you have to bring them up to seismic retrofitting. And then that was part of my presentation, is that if you look at that life cycle cost analysis, there's a delta in between those. And pull those up. In fact, let me, over here. So this is just a copy of that study. And so with option 1, which was a retrofit or rehabilitation option, when you consider everything, initial, future, user, maintenance cost, it's $248 million. These are 2020 dollars. Option 2 was 223, but again, these are just rehabilitation costs. They do not include seismically retrofitting costs, as compared to $182 million in 2020 dollars to build new over a shorter time frame. So now that seismic deficiencies are there, those have to be done. Not just the structural rehabilitation, but they also have to bring up the seismic retrofit standards.
So, so what you're saying is that it's, how many million? I
Which
read
one?
that, but I
Sure.
forget it.
So option one was considering a new 3-lane, what they're calling a lifeline structure to, let me,
You mean you can't rehabilitate them and maintain traffic at the same time on them?
so options 1 and 2 was proposing a new eastbound structure wide enough to accommodate 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction during the temporary conditions while retrofitting was taking place on the existing structures. While those retrofittings are taking place, the eastbound bridge would be used as that lifeline, allow the work to be taking place. Once all the retrofits were completed, then they would move the traffic back from, that lifeline would then change into, let me pull up the cross section of it so you can see what they're talking about.
The retrofitting takes place underneath the bridge.
So here's what this new quote unquote lifeline structure was going to look like. This was providing the temporary cross section while rehabilitation efforts were taking place on the existing bridges. You had 2 lanes in each direction, mimicking what you have today. Once all the rehabilitation was completed, then this new eastbound lifeline structure provides you your 3 dedicated travel lanes and shoulders on either side. The difference between options 1 and 2 was that in option 1, the westbound structures over Skull Creek and Mackey were just going to be rehabilitated. Option 2, they were going to replace the bridge over Mackey, and that was the delineation between the two. If you look at the differential in cost, you can see that option 1, you're rehabilitating existing structures, so your initial cost is lower, correct? But then you're going to have future maintenance costs because you're going to have to replace that bridge 20, 25 years down the road. User costs were, I don't have my notes for what that was. That includes, time delay for motorists and some other items, and then maintenance costs associated with that. Option 2 was more of a front-end cost because you are going to be replacing the westbound Mackey structure and then just rehabilitating the Skull Creek. Then you can see future cost is less because now in the future you're just replacing one bridge versus the other. If you look at the maintenance costs, you may wonder what the difference is with this new structure. It's because the existing structures have a substantial amount of steel in them, whereas there'd be less steel-based structures and more concrete. And so if you look at the total overall cost, $20 without cost to seismically retrofit one of these, which is just going to be a higher delta when you compare it to build new, 50 plus million here, 40 plus million here, and it's going to take longer to construct.
So how did the initial construction costs, where do those numbers come from? Where's the breakdown on that?
We can provide you with the seismic study that we were provided.
No, is that out of the seismic study or?
Correct. Yes.
In other words, you just accepted that as an acceptable number?
Correct.
You didn't check that number?
Part of the scope was we haven't been provided any historical data like cost breakdown from the DOT. That's one thing that is very difficult to obtain. And so part of the scope was to take this and provide our professional opinion. Did it appear to meet standard engineering practices? Do their findings appear valid?
In other words, let me understand, you took that number, 130,000, or 130 million rather, 129 million, whatever, as gospel.
Because
You didn't check it.
we were not asked to go back, because we would have to go back through and go back through and do an incredible amount of critiquing on a design that we had no part of. What we focused on,
Get those numbers from DOT,
we got,
all the breakdown on that 129 million.
we could look in the study, but what we're focusing on is just that, these right here, which makes intuitive sense that you would have a lower initial cost at the front end because you're replacing less structures. This is significantly more because you're replacing all of the bridges.
Okay.
All right. So, public comment. Yes, sir.
It's so cold in here, my teeth are chattering, so I'll do my best. The first thing I'd like to say is that
Please state your name and
oh,
address,
sorry,
please.
Christopher Cliff. The SCDOT letter of 2nd of May did not speak on behalf of the federal highways. On the contrary, it laid out in several paragraphs why they don't want to speak to federal highways. So I've heard today several people make comments that the federal highways wouldn't accept certain things. Nobody actually knows. Okay? I don't understand why this committee would pass a resolution, or consider a resolution, I should say, to accept a report that hasn't yet been finalized. Nate earlier on said that on task 4, I believe, you're only 50% overall complete. So until you chaps see the final report, I think the wisdom is you should hold back on your own judgment. Thirdly, I thought the simulation on the videos was very impressive, although I have to say it did confuse me. If you look at the traffic volumes of the past 5 years, you can see that the change of traffic onto the island is well within, below in fact, the forecast estimate of Nate's team. But one thing that's very striking, that when the toll dropped, the traffic over the Cross Island Parkway in 1 month increased by about 80,000 vehicles. And so the traffic going over the Cross Island Parkway has increased in the last couple of years by well over 100,000 vehicles per month. And I suspect that if you look forward, the growth going to this Cross Island Parkway will be greater than the growth of the total coming onto the island. And I wonder whether that has an impact on actually the design, because the SCDOT, way back at the beginning, and have maintained it since, have actually not looked at the intersections beyond Spanish Wells, and they declined to give an opinion about the impact on the design of the growth in desire of traffic to get to Cross Island Parkway. In other words, what I'm trying to say, a way of getting traffic to the Cross Island Parkway without going through Stony is very desirable, I think, for the people that live in Stony, partially because I think the volume of traffic going to South Island Parkway is going to increase it faster than 0.56 per annum. And so I think we're being sold short here for people to suggest that a 6-lane highway driven through Stony is a solution to our congestion when it patently isn't. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Other comments? Yes, sir.
Hello, I'm Jack Alderman. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I've lived in Hilton Head Plantation for 34 years, and I'm the chair of the town's Housing Action Committee, but I'm not here speaking as a member of that committee, but as an individual. The Housing Action Committee obviously isn't taking up these items about the road system that you're talking about today. But there is a connection. Housing and transportation are all part of preserving our quality of life on the island for the long term and maintaining our economic vitality for the long term. And I'm frankly extremely disappointed to see issues being brought up again today that should have been, that really were resolved 3, 4, or 5 years ago in this process. And now folks are asking again to talk about whether the bridges ought to be 2 lanes each direction or 3, and whether we ought to pick a whole new route that somebody sketched up at this point. Those seem to me to be more like delay issues than real issue when we're at a time that the road gets more expensive every day we wait to build it,
and our quality of life and our economic vitality are more under threat every day that we wait to build this road and the bridges that connect it. So I am very much in favor of solving the issues that remain, not spending time chasing these red herrings that are being brought up. That we solve those issues one at a time and build the road and build the bridges and help to guarantee our future vitality as a community. I think it's extremely important to solve the issues for the Stony residents. The Steve Bear plan does the opposite of that, in my view, and should be rejected out of hand. But those folks need to be treated very fairly economically, and for the long term, after the road is built, they need to be supported. That's an important part of this, but that's doable, and there are several issues remaining to be solved. They can be solved. They should and must be solved quickly before the road gets any more expensive and before we lose any more of our quality of life here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Chris Ruffner, Windmill Harbor. I don't really have anything prepared. I've just been sketching stuff as I've heard people talk. I'm originally from Chicago, and it's the worst traffic delays in the world right now. It's in the US, second in the world. And there's 2 seasons there, and it's construction and winter. So trust me, nobody here knows the first thing about, unless you've come from a big city, about traffic. The traffic here is nothing in comparison. So we have to think about that. Also, if you go to a surgeon, he's going to want to do surgery. So if we're going to, just go back to the Department of Transportation for everything, of course, they want to build roads, and a lot of these people, also being from Chicago, are getting kickbacks from people that are giving them, when they award these projects, they're making a ton of money in a back room somewhere, so you have to keep that in mind. We do have a beautiful island. I agree with the last gentleman that we do need to get something done, but it doesn't mean, just today, I haven't been really involved. I'm like a Monday morning quarterback here, but I just tried to quickly, like an hour before, print out some stuff, and I'm seeing all kinds of places like Los Angeles, which has really bad traffic, and other places that spent like $66 million in studies, and their projects were gonna cost billions, and they decided to scrap their projects because they learned that building more roads does not necessarily decrease traffic, and it creates induced demand. It's, if you build it, they will come. We're gonna just have more people that maybe weren't coming on the island during the peak hours because of the traffic. They'll say, ooh, new roads, or, we got an expanded road. It lasts for a little bit of time. It works at first, and then people come back. So that doesn't really help. And there's places like Singapore that have addressed these issues. Thank you. Have 1 or 2 lanes reversed during peak hours, and then maybe the rest of the day when it's not busy, those can be used for, buses that bring a lot of people at the same time. Maybe we offer incentives to businesses that can pay people to come, or they can stagger their hours if we give them a tax incentive to stagger their work hours, or we can help contribute for people to work during non-peak hours.
Good call, Ms. Ruffner. Thank you. Yes.
I'm Frank Babel, and I was in the original Gateway Corridor Committee, so I have some skin in the game, and when I was in that committee, my hair was gray. It's white. This has been an endless debate, and we solved a lot of these problems back then. We spent a whole year on it, 15 of us. And they're coming back again over and over and over again, and we don't make progress. So what's happened? What's the impact on our community? Well, first of all, let's look at the people. Let's look at our community. 1,100 people have been involved in accidents. That's 1,100 people who are involved in some traumatic experience. And you don't blame them? Because they're so frustrated because they're all trying to compete. That road does not work as it is right now. It is at capacity, and the slightest perturbation results in a crash. And if there's a crash, people are tied up for hours. My homemaker comes in, and it takes her 2 hours on average to get it, sometimes, to get to my house. It's just it's unacceptable, and it's being held up a lot by this red herring discussion. The second thing, so there's 1,100 people whose lives are being affected, and many more, and people just aren't coming here. Try to call and get a plumber. Talk about level of service. Go to a restaurant. Go to almost any place where there are people working. The people aren't there. The people are on the mainland because they don't come here anymore. My friends in Colton River, they don't come here to get their nails done. They stay in Colton. They don't come here to go to restaurants because of traffic. They're going to miss their appointments. The doctors that are here are now out on the mainland because the jobs are out there, because we are messing around with asking all these questions about this and that, and we'll be here 5 years from now, the current track, if we don't get going here, make a decision. The impact on commerce, what's happened on this? The mainland is growing like leaps and bounds. 18,000 people are going to be hired by Hyundai. 25,000 people at Jasper Port. 15,000 new homes are going in. Where are they going to get their people? Are they going to come here and go through that 2 hours of delay? And if you try to go with the existing bridge and have one lane, going through one lane, how's that going to work out? You know, and the view. Oh, the view is too wide. The view, people don't look at the road, they look at the view. That's what they look at. You know? And we have our traffic engineers. Everything, the solution is a roadway. Make it faster, make it more efficient. We're supposed to be a complete streets community. We're a goal-level bike-and-friendly community. We have 36 businesses who depend on renting bikes and selling bikes to people. Thousands of them. Just think if they weren't here, if they were in their cars. We didn't have this alternative transportation system. We didn't have this tremendous amenity that we have for recreation and community. So please make your mind up and get on with it. I mean, this is endless. And we all know where it comes from.
I've got
Thank you.
Time's up. Thank you very much. I can't see who that is back there. Yes, sir. Come up to the microphone, please, sir. State your name and address, if you would.
Alternative one is the only viable solution. Just got to go with it. There's a minority of people that are adamant against it. They oppose it, but they're armchair quarterbacks. They don't understand the impacts. Some of you don't understand the impacts, but you ask the questions. You know, it's got to be 12-foot lanes. It can't be wider, it's too expensive, but you get narrow, you get 11-foot lanes and people are going to go slower and it's going to cause more congestion. Even on we have 3 through lanes each direction. So, you know, the alternative one addresses all these. It's been addressed. I don't know what the posted speed limit's going to be. What is it, 55? Is it going to remain 55 on the bridges?
I think there's a desire to make it consistent 45.
45, so, you know, that's going to cause congestion. You know, the slower people go, the more congested it becomes. And that's the first time I've seen any cross sections. You showed a cross section of a temporary bridge. That would answer a lot of questions that, you know, people wouldn't be asking. It doesn't have to be 12-foot lanes. You know, everybody's got questions. People, you know, and SCDOT is talking about breakdown lanes. What's that, just a 10-foot shoulder? They should call it a 10-foot shoulder. And, you know, and that's standard for for that amount of traffic and the speed limit, a 10-foot shoulder, outside shoulders, 5 or 6 foot inside shoulders. You can use those for bike lanes. You don't need a dedicated 10-foot two-way pedestrian bike lane. You can delineate the shoulders for bikes and pedestrians. You know, that would take 10 foot times the length. And somebody asked, well, where'd they get the numbers? I've done estimates for bridges. It's so old, I used $1,000 a square foot. Now it's probably, that was 40 years ago. Now it's probably $2,000 a square foot. So that's where the answer comes for the bridges. But it's got to be done. 2 lanes are not going to work. And renovating the bridge on an old foundation is not going to work. That's just going to be throwing money down the pit. And then there's going to be at least mandatory bridge inspections every year. That's going to cost $50,000, $100,000. So let's get it built, like these guys said. Get it built and get it done so we can avoid the cost of bridge inspections and bridge maintenance and live. And, you know, these people that say, well, you know, I went from so-and-so and it only took me 12 minutes. So it took him 2 or 3 extra minutes. But you multiply that by 10,000 people, and you're talking about man days of hours of wasted sitting on the road where people could be productive. So, you know, there's means to get there. We just have to agree. And, you know, we got to quit calling it 11 lanes. There's no 11 lanes.
I need to cut you off. Your time is up.
As soon as somebody says that, I know that they're an armchair quarterback and they know nothing.
Sir, I need to cut you off. If you won't state your name, I'd appreciate that.
Gerald DeVito.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Becker.
Of course it did. Who made the first? Who presented this motion?
It was read by Mr. Colon.
It was read by Mr. Cullen. So who had the first?
First was by Mr. Warner.
Okay, and you made the second?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the clarification on that. But while I'm up here, I also want to make one other clarification. And I wanted to thank Mr. Babel for pointing out the beautiful view from the bridge, because that is what draws people in. That is what brings them here and keeps them here. So thank you for that comment. We don't want to lose that view and that intense emotion associated with Hilton Head. But secondly, I wanted to also thank Mueller, because you did do, at your own time and expense, a cursory review of the bypass that was in discussion and contention. And I appreciate you doing that. Well, one of the other things I heard you had said is that you asked that if the town wanted y'all to move a little bit further, you would give an estimate of time and cost on that, and that you were told no. Now, I want to make a clarification here that at no point in time did town council, at least this town council member, have any advice on that was being requested, or asked to consider it, to give you a yes or a no on a thumbs up. And I bring that up because at an earlier time in these discussions, when there was a point being made about the length of time, that it would go a little bit longer than perhaps was projected, and so additional costs might be incurred. I had a long conversation with our senator about that and where could we possibly find the money. And he assured me that if more money was needed to get the job done in a timely manner that incorporated everything that we wanted, the money would be found. So for clarity, when you asked that very important question, said that we were thorough, and I don't believe that we're thorough, and I also don't believe that we've completed the task at hand to even be able to be sitting here asking for a vote on a resolution. But be that as it may, but when you asked that very important question, the answer was known, and clarity for town council, at least this council member, was not asked my opinion on that matter. So I'm not sure who's all running the show, but thank you.
Could I just make, I can appreciate that, Ms. Becker. I just want to read the last sentence in the memo that I put together. My statement was, not what I said today, but is pending a decision regarding the southern bypass. As your projection, we will proceed with our task 4 related modeling for alternative 1 only. Any further evaluation of the southern bypass will be placed on hold until definitive direction is received from you, and we never received direction. So I
Right,
apologize
because we
for-
weren't asked. That's my point. Because we weren't asked, or at least I wasn't asked. So I don't know if you got a yes or a no. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you asked a question. The town council who could authorize an answer to that, to be able to proceed to cover every aspect that this committee felt was important, was not done. And I'm concerned about that, for one. A little bit upset about it, too, quite frankly. And I have more to say, but I'm going to reserve that for June 20th. Thank you.
Other comments from the public? Yes, sir. Just a reminder, state your name and address.
Good afternoon, Greg Whitaker, 2 Governors Lane, Hilton Head. Thank you all for your time. Thank you for presenting the information. My understanding there will be a public forum on Monday, is that correct?
That is correct, at 5 o'clock.
Additional information will be shared. I would encourage the group that's doing that presentation to show some of the simulation. I think the simulation helped dramatically to communicate what a vision would be of the a potentially updated corridor. The other thing I'd suggest is comment specifically about why reversible lanes were maybe considered and then dismissed. And then also, I think, address comments about the southern bypass. I think it would be good to communicate each of those key elements on Monday so the public has a broader view on this, can make at least an informed perspective regardless of what the decision is by the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, sir.
Gray Smith, 11 Weilers Creek Way, Hilton Head. I want to start off with a very positive comment. I had to drop a car off at AutoNation early this morning. So I found myself coming back onto, right at Moss Creek, coming onto the bridge at 7:24. There was stop and go till the merge from the Parkway, and then there was steady, slow, but steady progress across the bridges. It took me 6 minutes to reach landfall. And then it took me another 5 minutes to get onto the Cross Island. And I want to compliment the Hilton Head Island Traffic Department, because I think from when I got stopped briefly at the Windmill Harbor light for about 8 seconds. There were 16 cars in front of me, 8 on each lane, and then it started to go. And it didn't stop until I got to the Cross Island. And I think that's mostly because from when I could first see the lights, both lights at Squire Pope and Spanish Wells stayed green and traffic flowed. And that's, we're in June, so it's a pretty peak time of the year. And granted, maybe a little bit early on the morning commute, but 11 minutes, and I thought that was terrific, and I think it's indicative of what many of us have said all along. It's not how many lanes, it's how free-flowing the traffic is through our corridor. So thank you very much for getting that progress going. I think that it is premature to approve and accept the findings and recommendations, because as the gentleman said, they're not done. They're, what, 50% done on one phase, so 75% done altogether. I would really like to see the committee wait and get all the answers and all the conclusions before you accept it. I get the feeling trying to rush this, trying to get it through. I think you owe it to the townspeople of Hilton Head to get all our money's worth from the consultant. And finally, basically, there are a lot of people on this island who don't want an 11-lane, single-slab, super highway as the entrance to our beautiful island. So that's one. The second thing is, I don't know if you looked at this, but intrinsically, it doesn't make sense from a safety factor, whether it's hurricanes or earthquakes or ships hitting the bridge, to have one bridge instead of what we have now, two separate bridges. That's more of a safety factor. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Richard Busy, Indigo Run. So much talk about the southern bypass, and let me be very clear, the consultants, as it said in one of the slides, they did a cursory review. It should have received the same design and evaluation efforts as was spent on the other options. The bypass is only 9/10 of a mile long, yet it diverts the traffic coming onto the island to have a direct link with the Cross Island Parkway, where we know that at least 50% of the traffic is headed. Now, it's obvious to me from the comments made from the consultant that they don't really like the plan. That was a starting point submitted by the technical working group. It wasn't the end-all, be-all. Make it better. Work on it. And the consultants have said in this, buried somewhere in this report, 139 pages, that they would do a full evaluation of the southern bypass. It would cost an additional ballpark $31,000 and take about 3 weeks to complete. Not bad. And all the talk from Mr. Collin about the impact on Stony from the southern bypass, and yet he advocates a 6-lane expressway through the center of Stony. That doesn't have an impact? Be real. I recall speaking to this committee about 6 months ago. It was the very first meeting, and I wanted to verify exactly what I said, but there was no video of the meeting. In fact, no minutes of the meeting. So here's my best recollection. I wanted to ask our consultants one basic question. How do you plan to maintain your independence in this project, given the fact that the Chamber of Commerce, the unelected Greater Island Council, developers, town hall staff, and the mayor himself have voiced support for a massive bridge and a 6-lane expressway through Stony? You, Mr. Mayor, told me that I couldn't ask the consultant questions. Only committee members could. Our consultants are making more than $420,000 for their work, and I'm pretty sure that's not committee money. I think it's taxpayers' money, so we are footing the bill. Here we are 6 months later. It's blatantly obvious that political interference has mucked up this process, and the result is not as independent as we had hoped. And it was the very scenario that we had feared. It's though we have wasted $420,000 of taxpayer money. Think about this. After spending all this money, the consultants are essentially recommending the very same plan advanced by the SCDOT with a few tweaks. The town, including the mayor and town hall staff, led by Mr. Collin, have reneged on its leave no stone unturned promise. Both of them were at the meeting last week that we hosted, and you should have heard loud and clear how the residents feel, in particular the residents of Stony. Rushing to approve close to a $500 million plan, already sending alarm signals while ignoring a bypass plan is irresponsible. Vote no.
Thank you. All right, another call. Any other comments from the public? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Kathleen Redmond, and I live at 15 Hobony Place in Indigo Run. I really didn't think I was going to speak, but following the meeting, I just want to say I love our island. I love coming onto our island. And I will be so sad to see a superhighway on our island. I know no one wants to hear this, but I did come from the north, and the highways there are terrible. And they keep expanding them, they keep constructing them. We just need to come up with something that functions. We need 2 lanes in either direction. We don't need 6. That's just where I'm at. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, ma'am.
Carol Buxer, Palmetto Hall. My issue is the 11-lane slab. Monstrosity is what I call it. And we don't need that. I think we only need 2 lanes going each way. And I'm with Gray where he said 2 bridges, not 1 slab. This was sent to next door, and it's called the Broadway Bridge. Well, guess where it goes to? Daytona Beach. It's only 2 lanes. I believe there is a breakout lane or whatever, and a bicycle path, which I don't see where we need that either, because you go across the bridge, how many times you see a bicycle or even walking going across there? And we definitely don't need that push-out thing that I saw. That is a possibility, because guess what? People just jump off the bridge. If they go and walk all across, they ride the bike, they're going to jump off the bridge. That's what they do. But anyways, I am so against taking any of Stony area at all. That you have in your quarter here, all nothing but Gala country, or areas, and celebrating that. That's what is Hilton Head Island. People come here and they say, oh, well, I heard about the Gala company, our country. So they want to go see, they go to the museums and whatever. And, they like going to see that stuff. And you're taking away some of the people's property. That is unacceptable. And as I said, you see all this here and you celebrate it every year and whatever everything is, and you don't do anything about it except for, oh, we're going to take this away because, we need it for the bridge. No, we don't. And I'm sure there is people here that is, for me, say the same thing. And I'm just very upset over this whole thing that's, taking place. And I don't get to come every time, having meetings and stuff, like some of the people I know. But I think that you should really, really, really reconsider having a 11-lane bridge, that many break-offs. We don't need that many. And you were talking about the Jersey thing, and we don't need those slabs. How's people, if they're going to break down, how are they going to get over there if there's a wall, concrete brick wall there? I mean, seriously. And I've gone down to Florida, 4 lanes going on the main highway there. And guess what? They broke down, and we were sitting in traffic for 2 hours, 4 lanes for 1 breakdown. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Buxer. Appreciate it. Any other comments? All right, seeing none. Any other discussion from the committee? Nope. So we'll call a vote. All those in favor of us adopting the resolution, signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed? It is 2-2. Yep, that means it doesn't pass. All right, so Karen, do we have any appearances from citizens that were not related to any of the agenda items today? Do you have anybody sign up?
No.
Were there any portal comments?
No, sir.
Okay, with that, we're adjourned. Thank y'all.